Two worlds, two guiding lights, two people, one life. Can two civilizations so different in history move beyond their mutual curiosity, pleasure, fear, and desire, and come to understanding? This is a story of what is and what might be, about you and me, a story of true possibility. My wife and I share a room with our son. It is a big bedroom, but a small apartment. His bed is on one side, our bed on the other. Recently, in the middle of a quiet night, I heard him talking out from the solitude that is behind his closed eyes. The words are real words, and together they compose real fragments. Bring that, go bring that back, out loud. Then some other words I can't recall now, from his inner world in the dark, from the depths of his dreamy consciousness, toward the outer dimly lit world of the bedroom, to his only audience, me, barely awake and barely aware. I recall in the morning only approximations of the utterances, almost as if the memory of it too was just a figment of my own dream. But when I told the story of the night before, I found that my wife also heard it, confirming the reality, though doing little to clarify it. Frederick Buechner, in his book Alphabet of Grace, says that all story is essentially autobiography, and then goes on to talk about where such stories originate. He does not speak of material origins, but immaterial ones. He reflects upon various ways in which the invisible manifests itself in the visible world. He begins with the example of wind making itself known in the blowing of waves on a lake, or the words of a sleeping person speaking out from the dream world, as so happened with my son, or when silence between two strangers is broken by a word that becomes a bridge, crossing over between two invisibles. Moment by moment, chance circumstance after another, these invisibles build our world. We get married, perhaps have children, find work, and the story develops. It is the story of our lives, and story suggests a plot, a purpose, or a destination. Yin Lin Dai and Bobby Young's story begins much like this. Fragments of memory compose it, and these memories, like waking from a dream, gain a mythical quality. We recall some pieces of the dream, and the rest disappears. Today I am working with my grade 1 students. I am especially conscious of their presence as visible expressions of invisible consciousness. I think and feel toward them as if they are spirits. I see my students as holy, as miracles. I believe myself to be in the presence of angels or gods, and the level of appreciation I have for them is difficult to put into words. I am in awe. One student, a blond boy named Taz, whose face is covered in a blue mask because of COVID, and whom I suspect is on the autism spectrum, stands at an angle beside me, holding an open book in both arms, and talks to me about Thomas the Tank Engine. I'm sitting in a chair beside the teacher's desk. Taz is close enough that I can look onto the pages, but not so close. He doesn't want me to read the book. He wants me to listen to him as he tells about the book. If I try to view the pages, he backs away. One by one, he opens the pages to a different character, appearing to select each one in a different location of the book. "This is Percy," he says. There is a pause. Then, reflecting, he adds, "Percy is Thomas's best friend, and he delivers the mail." I look into his clear blue eyes and see calm and earnest intention. Once we make the connection with our eyes, he looks down and turns the page. Meanwhile, another student, Isha, wants to hand in her writing. She approaches me to show her drawing of the play kitchen that is in the classroom. She points out the detail in the drawing, including the tap and the sink. Beside the kitchen is a representation of her and her friend Manju playing. They both have long dark hair and two different but colorful dresses. Manju is about double the size of Isha because, according to Isha, she's taller than me. I look into Manju's eyes where I see joy and contentment. I express my appreciation of the care that was put into the lines and the colors of the image. Meanwhile, Taz is still monologuing in front of me. "Iron Bert and Iron Airy," he reads. I can't hear the rest, but Taz is still eagerly relaying his information to me, apparently unfazed by my conversation with Isha. Along comes Kirsten. She is blonde and has a deliberate appearance. She shows me her completed work, and I am delighted with 2 pages of plot conveying a fictional incident. She reads to me about 2 brothers who are searching about, looking for a wagon that has gone missing. It was just there moments before when they had stopped to take the bottles in for recycling. They look around and no one is to be seen except a small old lady who's hunched over on the bench waiting for a bus. "Did you see someone take our wagon?" they ask the old lady. She replies, "I saw your friend take it around the corner over there," she points. On the story goes. It turns into a complicated mystery, and I am impressed with the complex structure of the story coming from a 6-year-old child, and how natural it appears for her. I look at her appreciatively and even laugh at the humor I see. Her eyes sparkle as she says, "I love writing stories. I can write pages and pages." "Really?" I exclaim. I am genuinely shocked. Children can love writing this early in life. Once again, I recognize a spirit in front of me manifesting as a body, a human being developing into maturity 1 page at a time. I put the written work onto the hand-in pile, and Kirsten goes to do her daily 5 with the other students who have also completed their writing. "This is Emily, a beautiful emerald green engine," continues Taz. "She can be bossy and thinks she knows best." "I see," I reply. A Chinese girl with the anglicized name of Kaylee, wearing shiny black sweat-style pants and hair cut in a bob, squeezes between my chair and desk and spots the grade 6 seating plan. She asks me, "Are you teaching grade 6? I reply, "Yes, when your teacher returns, I'll go back to the grade 6 class." "My sister is in grade 6, she says, while scanning the seating plan. "Here." She points to the name Haley on my seating chart. "That's my sister. Angie is her friend." I can see that they are beside each other on the page. Taz never loses patience, but now with the back of my head toward him, turning as I am to view the seating chart on my desk, I notice a pinching on my toe, and I see that Taz has closed the gap between me and him, and now he is standing directly in front of me. He's pressing my toe a bit on purpose, and backs away when I turn to look. He tells me that He can say a really interesting story as he continues talking. I wonder at where this spirit before me is headed in life. Eventually it is time for recess. Everyone leaves the class, but one girl, perhaps the tiniest one named Misha, puts her bright yellow boots on, then stops to powder her face with a makeup brush, the kind with a little wooden handle and a puff of soft hair on the end. It has such an adult appearance to me that she must have seen confusion or shock in my eyes, because she replies to my look by saying that she's putting on sunscreen. I smile and say, "That's what it is." She puts the brush away and then disappears out the door. So cute, I think. Later, I return to the grade 6 class. Several boys are being physical with each other, hiding one another's personal belongings, hitting or knocking each other sometimes, and a few of the girls are displaying themselves to the boys, sometimes dropping their sweatshirts to display bare shoulders with tank top straps, sometimes bending over a table for overly extended periods of time. The room is full of fidgety social energy, everyone highly attuned to everyone else. Again, I think about the wind moving over the pond, or the voice speaking out of a dream, spirits gathering. Every one of these children is growing into the person they will soon be. They are preparing themselves to leave the womb or dream of their childhood, and they are using the vocabulary of their culture to communicate to each other. Communicate what? Look into my eyes and you'll see I'm the only one. This is the beginning of a song by Queen called You Take My Breath Away. It is a love song using lover language, but can't we be lovers of the world? This is what I was feeling the other day while working with my students. I meditated on the concept of invisible consciousness manifesting itself in the visible world while appreciating the students. Appreciating how their souls, reaching out through their bodies, touch the world. It is perhaps in a similar mood that we greet Bobby on a cloudless morning in early summer. Though the air is crisp, heat from the sun collects into a blanket of warmth, hovering just above the chill wall. Bobby stands with his body pressed against the side of the house, cool on his chest and warm at his back. He has a red plastic bowling pin in his right hand. Bobby reaches up the side of the house. His stretched out arms pull his shirt up, exposing his bare belly, which rubs against the speckled bits of white stone and colored glass. Bobby runs his free left hand along the rough surface, glittering in the sun like crusty vanilla mint ice cream. With his other hand, he sweeps his bowling pin upward in arcs, trying to cover as much of the studded surface as he can. The bowling pin bounces and scrapes smoothly over and back. He is 3 years old, immersed in the physical pleasure of his world. "I'm magic," Bobby said, as if he were talking to himself. Without looking, Joey, the neighbor boy, replied, "No, you're not." Joey crouched to the nearby ground, poking the black soil with a broken bit of branch. "Yes?" Bobby turned from the wall and stood before Joey, who kept poking and scratching. "I am," Bobby insisted, standing over Joey. "I'm magic." Without looking up and continuing to dig in the dirt, Joey simply replied, "No." His childish manner wasn't argumentative, merely factual. An indignant energy surged into Bobby's body, and he moved toward Joey, whopping him on the head with his plastic bowling pin. It bounced off Joey's head with a hollow plastic thud. Bobby looked at Joey with a mix of fight and flight in his wide eyes. Joey's refusal was a challenge, and it pressed Bobby to tears. Joey blinked, stood up, and stared at Bobby. With his own sudden spontaneity, Joey pushed Bobby hard, and Bobby fell backward, landing first on his bottom, then back until his head bounced on the grass. He dropped the bowling pin. Bobby got up and searched out his bowling pin, but was distracted by another motion on the green grass ahead to his left. A little girl, Joey's younger sister, ran with a wobble across the grass completely naked. Her arms were in the air as she giggled with pleasure. Her blonde curls shone in the light of the bright sun, and as she turned, Bobby saw something astonishing. Between her legs there was nothing like what he had. Bobby didn't have words for what he saw, but something brighter, more shiny than the speckled white wall and more refreshing than the early morning air, struck him deep inside. Bobby felt drawn. His little body didn't understand what captivated him as he stood motionless, watching her pale, white, fat, rumpled body run across the grass. From the left, Joey entered the scene with his stick. Joey, too, was giggling. He chased his sister, reaching down, and with careful speed placed the stick in her bum. She continued walking with the stick dragging behind her in the grass. Her arms had lowered, and her fingers spread as she walked haltingly. Her face contorted with confusion, and her steps were no longer light and happy. Joey laughed and pointed at her. Bobby stood watching, his feeling of joy clouded over. He wanted to go back to his house and hide. Bobby heard Joey's mother calling into the yard, asking what was wrong with Faye, and Joey quickly pulled the stick out of his sister. Many times afterward, Bobby would stand outside, watching to see if Joey or his sister were playing. He asked his mother about them, and she said she saw them sometimes, but didn't think they were a happy family. "Do you know the father spanks his children on their bare bum?" Bobby was horrified. "He takes off their pants?" Bobby pursued. "Yes." "Why? Why does their daddy take off pants?" Bobby felt frightened. "Some parents do that when their children are bad. Sometimes they spank them with a spoon or a belt." "Am I bad?" Bobby asked. "Sometimes," his mother smiled teasingly. There was a moment of silence. "But you don't take down pants?" Bobby probed. "No, we don't take down pants. Maybe we should. Do you think your mommy and daddy should spank you like that? What would you like more, a spoon or a belt?" Bobby looked at his mother. He didn't say anything, not knowing how to answer the question. "Don't worry," Bobby's mother joked. "I'm just teasing you. I don't think parents should do that with their children. Mommy will never do that." Bobby's mother tried to be comforting. After a short silence, and obviously not finished with the topic, "What if their dad spanks me?" Bobby asked. Bobby's mom looked at him. "You mean you think Joey's daddy will spank you?" "Yeah." No, never mind. Nothing will happen to you. You will not get a spanking." After that conversation, Bobby avoided the neighbor's house and the topic. Yet sometimes when they loaded up in the car, Bobby would look back at his neighbor's dark living room window and wonder about Faye and that sparkly summer morning. Next to her bath photo is another image of Yinlin outside the rear of her childhood home. The home is a single-level flat constructed of brick, built side by side with several other flats. Using a system of shared walls, they form a horseshoe-shaped enclosure around a small courtyard. The brick walls are covered with an off-white concrete plaster, and the courtyard is paved and well maintained with frequent sweeping. There are few plants. A bicycle leans against the wall behind Yinlin. The photo was taken early in the afternoon. Yinlin is similar in age to Joey's sister. Her hair is tied on both sides in small ponytails. There is no smile on her face. Rather, it is contorted into a frown, her eyebrows furrowed downward, shielding from the sun. She wears a white and yellow dress with ribbons hanging down the shoulders and waist. While the dress looks fresh as spring, her face looks as if she is immersed in a pit of snakes. She chokes back what she can of her tears, and her mother wipes the rest away, but hardly notices, as she beams with pride at the beautiful dress she made for her daughter. The other ladies acknowledge how fortunate Yinlin is to have a mother who makes such nice dresses. "How much your mother loves you," they exclaim, in the usual affirmations. It is part of the family orientation of Chinese people to let the children know how much their parents sacrifice for their benefit. However, no one commented how different the dress was from normal children. If this dress were on an adult, it would be thought too showy, too decorative and attention-getting. Though the overwrought elegance of this dress was obvious to everyone, it seemed somehow acceptable since it was for a young child. Yinlin's mind was consumed with the thought of the itchy, scratchy ribbons. Every time a warm breeze blew over her damp skin, it created a cooling sensation, and the blowing ribbons felt to her as if evil spirits were creeping into her flesh. To Yinlin, the ribbons were snake demons. She shuddered deeply, hopping and jostling about in order to escape them. Her mother got angry. "Yinlin, stand still. How can we take a photo with you jumping like that? You need to let your father see you in this photo." Her father was not around to make smiling faces, but Comrade Wen cooed patiently to her, coaxing her into a proper pose which would last moments only, until she once again lost focus, stamping and wriggling to get the itching demon ribbons off her arms and legs. As evening approaches, Yinlin is back in her normal clothes, a pair of gray shorts and a loose-fitting white cotton shirt. She sits on the ground playing with a small blue truck that has "Long Live Chairman Mao" written on the side. The smell of rice and soy sauce lingers in the air, and adults lounge about, fanning themselves, while a few mothers are casually removing dishes. One of the men cuts the hair of another. There is laughter and animated storytelling. Someone had seen photos on the newsboard earlier in the day indicating that an American orchestra was visiting China. This was big news, though perplexing. Chairman Mao is often quoted as saying that it is bad if China is not attacked by the enemy. Because if China is not attacked by the enemy, then a clear distinction is not being made. China's virtues would be diluted, and China would become indistinguishable from the other nations. However, the times had become uncertain recently, as only a few months ago the president of the great imperialist nation visited with Chairman Mao and other officials as a guest of China. Now the news tells of a large group of American symphonists playing their music in major Chinese cities and touring about China. No one thought they would see the day that counter-revolutionaries would walk about freely in China. Today, photos display Jiang Qing, Madame Mao, and fellow Gang of Four member Yao Wenyuan sitting in the front row of a performance that took place on September 16, 1973 in Beijing. "Who saw the photos of Jiang Qing attending the concert?" one of the ladies asked. "It's normal for Jiang Qing to attend concerts," another replies. "Sitting in the front row with Yao Wenyan," says the first. "That must be an honored performance," replies another. as she chews on a sunflower seed. "She was wearing a dress," says the former. "I saw that too," says another, as she approaches the seated ladies. "The dress was black silk." Some in the circle looked at each other, and another one, fanning herself with the cloth, asked, "Were her shoes pointed?" There is slight laughter, but an increased carefulness with their language. "What kind of concert?" asked one of the ladies, sitting back in the shadows. "It was an orchestra, an American orchestra," replies the first one. She emphasizes the word American and feels the importance of her words and the effect it is having on the others. "Long live Chairman Mao," another lady said. "Yes, long live Chairman Mao and long live the revolution," replied several others, as silence settled in the group. To a Western audience, this interaction does not completely convey what is being communicated during the conversation. The meanings are concealed behind a well-developed carefulness whereby words with an officially accepted meaning can carry a secondary and implied meaning that a knowing individual might pick up on. Most people at this stage in the Cultural Revolution had learned how to shift back and forth between the implied and literal meanings of words so as to escape possible accusation. The birds have ears, as it has been said, and even innocent conversation about publicly known events could have negative repercussions. It would do for us to go back and replay the conversation so that the implications of the words may be clearly translated. "Who saw the photos of Jiang Qing attending the concert?" one of the ladies asked. Translation: "I have something strange to announce." "It is normal for Jiang Qing to attend concerts," another replies. Translation: "We all know her revolutionary duty as Vice Chairman of Culture is to fight imperialism and promote the revolution. Of course it is her job to reform and supervise the arts in China. There is nothing strange here." "Sitting in the front row with Yao Wenyuan," says the first. Translation: "She attended as a guest, not a supervisor." "That must be an honored performance," replies another, as she chews on a sunflower seed. Translation: "If she is the guest, she is showing everyone how wonderful this is, a true model for the revolution." "She was wearing a dress," says the former. Translation: "It is clearly not a model for the revolution." "I saw that too," says another, as she approaches the seated ladies. "The dress was black silk." Translation: "Jiang Qing is acting as a counter-revolutionary. She is wearing imperialist clothes and distinguishing herself higher than others." Some in the circle looked at each other, and another one, fanning herself with a cloth, asked, "Were her shoes pointed?" There's slight laughter, but an increased carefulness with their language. Translation: "We all know the story of the woman whose pointed shoes had the tips cut off by the Red Guard because of their counter-revolutionary implications." At this point, the crowd of women see that the wife of Chairman Mao is clearly contradicting her own zeal to persecute those who dared to differentiate themselves from others, who expressed their longings for something like beauty and individual pleasure. It is not difficult to remember the pain that her office, along with the Red Guard, protectors of Chairman Mao, inflicted against the longings expressed in this culture stripped bare. And now, in full view of the entire country, Published in the official Chinese news media, she is doing the very thing that had once been cause for shame, pain, or death for any comrades willing to demonstrate even simple passions. "What kind of concert?" asked one of the ladies, quietly sitting back in the shadows. Translation: "What is she promoting? There must be some explanation for this strange shift in behavior." "It was an orchestra, an American orchestra," replies the first one. She emphasizes the word American and feels the importance of her words and the effect it is having on the others. Translation: "She is promoting friendship with the enemy." "Long live Chairman Mao," the First Lady said. "Yes, long live Chairman Mao and long live the revolution," replied several others, as silence settled in the group. Translation: probably confusion. A mix of, did all our suffering and struggle against capitalism bring us to the day that we entertain imperialist dogs in our own capital city, and let them feast their eyes on our women leaders, with, wow, so we might once again have beauty and color in China, with, is it possible that we might make friends with the West? Such conversations were taking place all over the country. Or if not exactly conversations, at least the thinking was changing. There was a shift in mood and tone throughout those parts of China that were attuned to the events of the day. However, change and thoughts of change also produce feelings of anxiety, as no one wants to see, once again, a return to the early chaotic years of the Cultural Revolution. Hope was a dangerous emotion, and was nearly always accompanied by anxiety and dread. What most people longed for was stability and peace, but they also wanted fresh air. Even now people were beginning to question what exactly the Cultural Revolution had accomplished, and what had been lost. Juyu sits on the edge of a bench appearing to listen, while absent-mindedly watching her daughter sit on the ground nearby. Juyu is still thinking about how beautiful the white and yellow dress looked on Yinlin that afternoon. A dress that would be seen on no other child in the country. She loved that dress. For Yinlin, the ordeal with her dress was already a forgotten memory. The clothing she wore now was much more comfortable. Though the heat of the day had passed, the ground on which she sat still radiated warmth, and the gentle evening breeze no longer gave her chills as it did earlier in the day. She absorbed the feeling of community in the after-dinner conversation. The chatting of adults, children running about, and the smell of food satisfied and contented her. She felt safe. Yinlin was always surrounded by people, first at home, and soon after with her mother at work. As Yinlin grew older, she soon joined other young children at school, where they were taught very early to be responsible, self-reliant, and devoted to Chairman Mao. School was not as we might imagine it today. It was a place of work, not play, where children learned many domestic and manual tasks, such as sweeping, folding clothes, preparing the table for eating, and doing small bits of factory work such as attaching fasteners, as well as early stages of mathematics and language. During each activity, the children had songs to sing, teaching them the values of their people. These were songs of dedication to hard work, progress, and ultimately Chairman Mao. For example, just before their afternoon sleep, the children sang, "I woke up to see my dear son was smiling. I asked why he smiles. I dreamt of Chairman Mao. Ha ha, ha ha, ha 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 ha. I dreamt of Chairman Mao. After this, the teacher would say, "Dream of a good revolution. No more talking," as she quickly shuttered the windows, causing the room to grow dark. Yinlin enjoyed these days. She particularly enjoyed the ceremonies, whether it involved marching, dancing, or flag waving. When everyone worked together in unison, dedicated to a single purpose, she felt larger than herself, more alive, more real. Yet even in these ideal conditions, the snake demon found ways to break into her world. One day, when Yinlin explored some cupboards next to her parents' bed, she noticed a sliding glass door which opened to a wooden drawer underneath. To Yinlin's surprise and delight, she discovered a box of white Chinese New Year balloons. Her parents must have forgotten about them. How exciting! She didn't hesitate to grab several handfuls, which she took to school and distributed during break time. "Here," she started passing the balloons around. "These are New Year balloons. Blow them up." "But it's not New Year," someone said. "Have fun," Yinlin replied excitedly. Soon the air was filled with balloons. Some of the older classmates helped the younger ones tie the ends shut. Fully extended, the balloons were long and white and had a little nipple on the end. Some children let the balloon go, causing it to whoosh about in a whirl. Others stood in place, blowing and blowing, unable to quite get the balloon to expand. Some just twirled the deflated balloons around like flags as they ran through the playground. "How come the balloons are white?" one of the children asked. "These aren't New Year balloons." Yinlin thought about it for a moment. "It's Bai Sujian," she replied, referring to the white snake spirit of Chinese mythology. Yinlin knew little about the snake spirit except that the snake took a female form and had a human husband, even producing a son for him. The teacher on supervision at the time noticed all the chaos. The unrestrained squeals and delighted chatter, along with the random movement in the air and on the ground, triggered something deep in her communal memory, reminiscent of a Japanese air raid, or the Red Guard swarming the school. Already disturbed by the appearance of disorder, she was even more horrified when she recognized what the balloons were. She saw Yinlin distributing her balloons and grabbed her, taking what remained out of her hands, and shouted to the other children, "Give me the balloons, right now!" Her voice sounded shrill in her attempt to gain control over a horrifying situation. Yinlin's imagination, already ignited by the excitement of the moment, grew only more intense as she saw the ferocity of the supervisor. To Yinlin, the teacher was an emanation of the jealous monk Fahai, who had come to capture Bai Sujian. Her countenance frightened Yinlin. Yinlin was taken away, where she was made to sit outside the office of Miss Shaoli, the principal. The door was closed, and Yinlin could hear the animated voice of Monk Fahai talking with the principal. The door opened, and the teacher promptly paced out of the room and down the hall. Miss Shaoli looked down at Yinlin and commanded in a firm voice, "Come inside, young lady." Miss Shaoli stood, looking down at Yinlin, who also stood. "What is your name, young lady?" she asked. "Yinlin, miss," she replied. "Yinlin, at our school we do not allow children to bring these dirty things. Do you understand?" Yinlin nodded her head vigorously. Now Yinlin, faced with the authority of the principal, suddenly became suspicious of the snake spirit's demonic influence. Had she been tricked? Is that why she was in trouble now? Miss Shaoli opened the top of a stove that warmed the office and dramatically dropped the balloons inside. There was a flame and smoke, and a breathtaking smell emitted from the stove as Miss Xiaoli put the lid back in place. At our school, we expect children to behave decently. We will not have any despicable things here. They are not allowed. Yinlin realized at that moment how close she had come to being captured by the snake spirit, and felt grateful that the principal had protected her. Miss Xiaoli continued, "We have contacted your mother, and she will be taking you home." Yinlin looked down. Now she knew she was in trouble, but felt sheltered at the same time. When her mother arrived and was informed about what Yinlin brought to school, she got red in the face, grabbed Yinlin roughly and brought her home, but said surprisingly little about the issue. Yinlin knew her mother was angry, but at the same time she understood that this would be a protection for her. Somehow, as the event transpired, Yinlin forgot the joy of playing with balloons and only had thoughts of evil spirits trying to possess her in the form of a snake. Yinlin wondered why the devil snake wanted her, and began to think she might have a curse. It gave her comfort that the principal dropped all the white balloons in the fire, but knew from the story of the white snake that fire had not been able to defeat Bai Suchen before. Behind Bobby's house was a burning barrel made from a rusted oil drum. The sides of the drum were corroded unevenly through the walls of the barrel, forming a rough ring through which you can see the black ash of previous burnings. Scattered about those black ashes glowed the remains of an earlier fire, like a dragon after battle, slowly cooling down in the ash heap. Flames popped up and disappeared, some flames lasting mere moments and others licking along unconsumed fuel before disappearing once again. More predominant than the quiet heat was the smell of soot and the damp of morning dew that mingled in the air. The barrel was beyond the backyard toward the alley where Bobby wandered to explore his dimly lit world under a gray fall sky. There were bits of trash littered here and there. Bobby spotted a tomato soup label folded into the ground. He pulled it. Part of the label tore off into his hand. He came close to the barrel and threw the label in the middle. It lay on the embers where the center of the label quickly turned brown, then black, and the edge of the label caught fire. The appearance of flames stimulated Bobby as the label curled into ash, hovering a little, then burning out in a puff. Bobby looked back and saw the burning pile near the fence. There was always a pile of refuse waiting to be burned. He pulled a cereal box from under some newspapers, and now, a little more bravely, he tossed the cardboard into the barrel. The cereal box didn't catch fire as quickly as the soup label. It was laying flat on the red embers, and only after a delay began producing smoke. The edges slowly turned black, as did the center. Then, in a burst of sudden combustion, produced a sizable flame. Bobby felt a bit of warmth as his fascination grew. He turned back to the burning pile and noticed a jumble of twigs and bramble. He grabbed a branch and threw it in the barrel. Unlike the paper, it did not change color or catch flame. He turned and grabbed a thicker branch, but it was connected with the rest of the bramble, and when he pulled one, he pulled all. He lifted the sticks up to the barrel, letting his belly get close enough to feel metal cool against his skin. He pushed a small stack of branches and twigs over the edge, while other twigs still held fast and hung over the outside of the barrel. He grabbed these twigs and raised them up as well until it was all hoisted over the edge. Again there was no flame. On top of the burning pile were stacks of newspaper damped from morning dew. He threw these in also. They lay on top of the branches and again didn't produce the desired effect. After a minute or two, a wisp of whirling smoke snaked out, and from somewhere deep inside could be heard a soft hissing. Bobby, remaining curious, watched for a while. It smelled like the beehive burners they pass by when driving through the countryside. He loved that smell. Since there wasn't much happening, Bobby dropped another cereal box sideways into the barrel. He heard a soft crackling, and the smoke got thicker. Flames began licking up the side of the cereal box, and the hiss and movement of air in the barrel increased. Bobby was feeling good about cleaning up the burning pile and added a few more cardboard pieces, causing the materials in the barrel to shift, suddenly revealing the twigs, now in flame, heating the underside of the soggy newspapers more intensely. Bobby stood and watched. He was really making progress. He grabbed more cardboard thicker than the cereal boxes. When he turned to the barrel, he was struck by the appearance of larger flames. It was marvelous. Some of the flames reached higher than the edge of the barrel. He threw the cardboard a little more fearfully than before, and it came to rest partly inside the barrel and partly on the edge. But it too began to catch flame quicker than before. Now the newspaper had caught fire, and small bits of gray matter began floating up into the air. Bobby watched, curious, as one after another gray patch of material, sometimes glowing red, drifted up into the sky. The flames in the barrel crackled, and wet bits of fuel hissed steadily, the flames reaching higher and higher. Bobby grabbed a piece of wood with some bent nails in it. He dropped it into the barrel. It landed with a woof, and a shower of red embers floated into the air. He found a few other bits of wood and tossed them in as well. Bobby gazed at the dancing fire, absorbed in the pleasure of the flames. He watched with fascination the rolling smoke and the embers drifting lazily up, up, high in the semi-bright morning sky. He followed these ashes higher, followed the little black bits swirling about in the gray airiness above. He stared, trying to see as high as possible, and still there were floating embers. The crackling sounds in the barrel soothed him, as did the dry heat of the flames. The soot on his hands and the discovery of soot on his shirt and pants all contributed to his sheer wonder of life. He stood there, taking it all in. A wailing off in the distance barely penetrated his consciousness. As the sound grew louder and more insistent, Bobby became aware of a raucous noise appearing to his right in the form of a red truck, which lurched to a halt with a whoosh and rattle right next to where he was standing. Bobby's own quiet delight had been invaded. A man in a black uniform and hat jumped out of the truck, grabbed Bobby, and pulled him back toward the yard. He had the authority of a policeman. He looked firm, and Bobby felt both obedient and afraid. What was going to happen to him? Would he be taken away? A couple of other men emerged from the truck, and surveying the burning barrel, grabbed a metal rod from somewhere and made adjustments to what was inside the barrel. They spoke calmly and confidently to one another, the sound of determined men solving a problem. Ashes and embers again floated into the sky, but the materials in the barrel shifted and the flame settled. Something caused Bobby to move. Had one of the men spoken to him? "Where's your mother, kid?" He could only remember pulling the screen door and running inside the house, letting the door slam behind him, and in tears seeking out his mother. "Mom! Mommy!" he shouted. Arising from the basement, she appeared around the corner, asking, "What's going on?" She had heard the siren while doing the laundry. Bobby reached out for her embrace. She bent down and placed her hand on his back as he hid his face in her leg, releasing his tears. After letting out several sobs, he breathed deep, deep lungfuls of air as the fear contained in his little body pulled at the innermost parts of him. In his mind he was telling her all the details, but all she heard was Bobby's incoherent distress and the sound of the truck with the men outside. Pulling away from Bobby, she turned and looked over the kitchen sink and out the window to the backyard. "Oh dear," she said. "I see what's going on." Turning toward him, she said, "Don't worry. Let me go out and talk to those men. You just sit here at the table, okay? Stay here. Don't worry. Mommy will be right back." He nodded his head, wiping his nose with his dirty arm, and began calming himself as his mother disappeared out the door. He could hear her voice talking and could hear male voices, but he couldn't make out what anyone was saying. Like the smoke rolling in the sky, their voices seemed to blend with the air. He thought he heard someone laugh. Bobby was already feeling better. At the beginning, when he saw the firemen, he thought it was a very serious situation, but now that his mother was involved, he should be all right. His mother returned through the door, and Bobby heard the truck starting up again. Bobby's mother began to speak, and the noise and rattle of the truck, the sound of the air brakes shushing, all faded away. "Come here." She smiled to Bobby. She grabbed a shirt and pair of pants, dropping them on the kitchen table. She pulled Bobby's shirt up tight over his large head and lifted him onto the cupboard beside the sink. She put soap in the wetted dishcloth and began to wipe the tear streaks from his face and the ash and soot from his arms and hands. "You were putting things from the burning pile into the barrel, right?" Bobby nodded. "Well, the neighbor lady's very nosy, and she was watching you. She thinks little boys shouldn't be playing around the burning barrel." "Neighbor lady?" Bobby asked. "Where?" "She was probably watching you from that window." In the days that followed, Bobby paid more attention to the window on the side of the neighbor's house, and he did see the neighbor lady looking out from there occasionally. Bobby didn't like the feeling of being watched, and was more careful after that. She shouldn't have done that, do you understand? The fire was not so bad, and even if it was bad, she didn't need to phone those men. When Mummy talked to them, they understood what had happened. They were not angry at you. Bobby's mummy looked him in the eyes. "Okay?" "Okay." Bobby trusted his mummy, and through her he learned to see the world. As each day passed, Bobby learned about his neighbors. There was the man who spanked his children on the bare bum. There was the lady who watched out her window and phoned the fire department when children played with fire. There were other neighbors also. Some did not live on the same street, but they lived in the same area. There was Crazy Mary. "Bobby, you see that old lady sitting on the bench over there?" his mother asked while they were getting a cart at the Safeway. "Look at her," his mother insisted. "That's Crazy Mary. You see she's holding a cane?" Bobby looked and saw a frowning, white-haired lady in a blue dress. She was sitting by the window on the other side of the checkout counters. She looked small and skinny. "That one?" he asked, pointing in her direction as his mother lifted him onto the shopping cart. "She's old," he said. He saw that she was thin and had very white hair. Her skin looked pale pink and waxy. She looked fragile, but also alert. "Right. She is old, and don't stare at her," his mother said sternly. "Just remember who she is. You stay away from her. She doesn't like children, and if you get close to her, she'll hit you with that cane." "Okay," Bobby said. He made sure to watch out for Crazy Mary after that. As soon as they got out of the car, he would look here and there for Crazy Mary. Sometimes he saw her, sometimes not. He only ever got close to her once after his mother purchased some groceries, but he remained on the other side of his mother as they pushed their cart past. He could hear Mary's scratchy voice saying something mean as they went by. On an early evening in October, after eating dinner, Bobby was looking for something to do. He wandered through the open door of the spare room. The spare room was directly across from the living room, connected by a small hallway. To the right and down the hall was his mom and dad's bedroom. To the left was the bathroom, and at the end of the hall, his bedroom. The spare room was small and sparsely furnished, with only a bed to the right and a desk and a chair to the left. There wasn't much to attract a person. However, there was a large plastic tub full of pens on the desk that invited Bobby's attention. Deciding to investigate, he closed the door. He reached up and grabbed the container, pulling it to his chest. He turned, and finding it not very heavy, upended the container, dumping the pens onto the bed. Surveying the tangled assortment, he selected one of the many red pens in the bunch. With his little toddler fingers and a meditative concentration, Bobby learned the procedure of clicking a pen. Turning it around in his hands, he did what he had observed adults do many times, which was to press the plunger on the end of the pen. As expected, the ink end popped out the opposite side. He tried pushing the ink part back into the pen, but this only resulted in marking his finger with ink. He dropped the pen and rubbed the ink on his finger, staring at it. Picking the pen back up, he stared at the ink end and turned the pen around. Something snapped, and the ink end disappeared into the shell once again. It snapped so hard that the pen fell out of his hand. What was that, he wondered, and why was the pen fixed again? He pushed the white plunger again, and again the ink end poked out, and again he was unable to return the ink end back into the shell. It was then that he noticed that if he pushed the plunger, it locked into place with a small white protrusion extending from the side of the pen frame. He tried pressing that protrusion, and that is when the pen snapped, the ink end gone once again. Bobby clicked and snapped a red pen in this way several times, feeling a sense of accomplishment. There were other pens which looked more smooth, like fish, round and shiny, unlike the red pens which had flat sides. A silver belt separated the top of the pen from the bottom. They came in several colors, such as mustard yellow, pea green, or brown. Bobby discovered that he could separate the pens by twisting them. Separating the pens led him to further discover the silver ring in the middle falls off. He could pull the ink tube out and a spring would follow, and sometimes the silver plunger came out with a little white piece attached to it. He started mixing the colors and attempted to join the brown pen to the yellow one. Eventually he tried to return things as they were, but it wasn't easy. The pens didn't look right. Some pens didn't click anymore, or the plungers didn't return to their former positions. The ink on some pens remained either stuck in permanent extension, or flopped in and out of the pen tip randomly. His father called from the other side of the door. "Bobby, it's bedtime. Time to change into your pajamas." Bobby realized the difficulty he got himself into with all the pens and pieces spread across the chenille bed cover. With shaking hands and small, infirm fingers, Bobby didn't know how to restore the pens back. Everything had a feeling of urgency when the door opened, and there was his father. "Bobby!" Bobby looked up, stunned at how quickly his father appeared in the door. "Didn't I tell you? You need to get into your pajamas. What's all this mess?" "I was just fixing these," Bobby began. "I'll fix you!" his father roared. He grabbed Bobby's hand roughly and pulled him into the air, hauling him off through the door to get changed. Somehow, the pens all returned to proper order, as Bobby learned several days later. But the image of his father appearing in the bedroom door stuck forever in Bobby's mind. There was another door, the back door, which was a few steps lower off from the kitchen door. The kitchen door remained open mostly, but in the winter it too was shut. Between this shut kitchen door and the outside door was a scattered arrangement of cold boots and shoes. When people entered from outside, they kicked off their footwear, which piled haphazardly about. The snow falling from these boots and shoes melted into puddles that never made their way inside the warmer, drier part of the house. However, there was also the passageway between the kitchen and the stairs, leading to the basement. Whenever Bobby went down to the basement, his socks got wet from the cold puddles on the floor of the entryway. "Bobby, come here," his mother said one day, late in winter. "I want you to see this door," she said, as she led Bobby through the kitchen door to the door that opened directly outside. "You see, when the door handle is like this, the door is locked. When the door is locked, then no one can get in. I want you to check and be sure this door is locked all the time. If you see it is unlocked, then you need to lock it. Do you understand? Don't unlock it." "Okay," he said. The door lock reminded him of the pen plunger. If the door handle was in, the door was locked. If the door handle was out, the door was unlocked. Bobby was very dutiful and careful to check the door several times each day. Whenever he went into the kitchen, he ran down the steps, dodged the cold puddles, and checked the door. "The door's locked, Mummy," he reported cheerfully. She was on the phone at the end of the kitchen counter and nodded to him with a smile. She was often having important phone calls with her friends, sometimes so quietly that Bobby could not hear what was said. Bobby must have done his lock monitoring job very well. Later, in the early days of summer, after everything had melted and the grass was green, his mother took Bobby in the MG to go pick up his daddy. Ben was a manager at Smitty's restaurant, but had Chinese food delivered from down the street. When Hannah arrived, Ben locked up the doors of the restaurant and threw the bags of warm food behind the driver's seat. Bobby had to sit on the small bench at the back of the two-seater, as there was no other place to sit. "Bobby, you watch these bags don't fall," his father said, as they climbed into the car. He turned the key, and the car rumbled into life. They soon pulled up to the house and slid out of the car into the cool early evening. Ben grabbed the bags and was the first to the door. He discovered the door was locked. "Bobby, check the front door, will you?" Bobby raced around to the front and tried a couple of times. The front screen didn't open. He came back around. "Can't get in, huh?" Ben said. He shifted the bag of food from one hand into the other, reached deep into his pockets, jingled around, and muttered, "Shit, I didn't bring my keys. Hannah, do you have your keys?" Hannah did not. "Well, why the hell would you go and lock the door if you didn't have the keys?" Hannah didn't reply. Ben continued to search his pockets, setting the food down on the step, and concentrated on various keys attached to his work key ring, but no luck. The sun was setting and it was getting harder to see. Soon it would be very dark. "We're just going to have to break in," Ben announced. He walked over to the small rectangular basement window where he bent down, and with one hand on his leg and another on the edge of the window, he tried to grasp and pull it outward. Nothing happened. The window remained. Bobby watched intently, getting down close with his father. Ben got on both knees and, using both hands, pulled once more, and the window gave way, bending outward on a hinge. The latch had been left open. No damage done. Aha! Everyone seemed excited by this. But who could fit through the window? Not Ben, and not Hannah. Only Bobby could fit through such a small hole. But the sun had already gone down, and the night insects were beginning their music. Bobby, you need to go down through this window for Daddy. Daddy will hold you and let you down. You just run up the steps and open the door, okay? Bobby was happy to be part of the excitement, despite the dark of the basement. Bobby would be doing something important, and just as he was careful to be sure the door was locked, he would be happy to ensure that the door was unlocked. Bobby got down on his belly. It was awkward at first, sliding backwards into the gaping window, feeling the cool rocks and tufts of grass rubbing his belly as his shirt slid upward. Getting through the window was the hardest part. Bobby scraped his belly and chin on the frame of the window, but after that it was only him and the darkness. His father also laid down on his belly and held Bobby with both hands. "Okay, that's it, son. That's it. Easy. Easy. Can you feel the floor yet?" "No," Bobby grunted quietly, his feet swinging out and back as his body and face rubbed the surface of the basement wall. "How about now?" his father grunted. "No." Bobby was worried. Will he disappoint his father? It seems he couldn't do the job he had been given. He swung his legs this way and that way, banging his knees against the wall, and finally used his feet to push against the wall. At least the wall gave a feeling of stability, but it made him pull against his father's grip. "No, no, no, don't do that," his father continued with effort. He let go of one hand and lowered Bobby further into the darkness. "Just let your feet hang down. Look at your feet. Can you see anything to step on?" At that moment Bobby's foot caught something. His body twirled a moment and once again released, mid-air. "What was that?" Ben said. He reached his head in and said, "Oh, there's a little table there. Do you see it? Try and put your foot there." A little child's kitchen table stood against the wall, the kind used for playing house with dolls and coffee or teacups. Bobby found the spot and rested his foot. He pushed and found the tension between his father and him was released. He didn't need to be held. He let go. He stood secure for just a moment when the closeness of the wall made him lose balance, and he dropped the small distance of the table to the floor. He was in. "Bobby, are you okay?" "Yep." Bobby was okay, but a bit disoriented. "Do you see the steps?" Look at me, son. You see Daddy? You see where I'm pointing? No, look at me, son. Look at where my voice is. The steps should be this way, you see? Over there." From the dim light of the window, Bobby could see his daddy pointing. He could barely see the steps leading up out of the basement, but it was clear the direction he had to go. He got on his feet and clambered up the stairway, feeling his way up, using the banister to guide him. He found the familiar locked door, unlocked it, and opened it to the soft glow of the evening sky. "That's my boy," Bobby heard his father say, and the lights were switched on. Soon enough the house was filled with sound. The bags were opened and the food spread across the counter and stove. The salty aroma of Chinese food marked the momentous occasion. Together they sat at the kitchen table, and Bobby tried an egg roll for the first time. As they sat, Ben looked at his son and smiled. He reached out and tousled Bobby's hair, saying, "You were a little burglar tonight." His father chortled affectionately, "You broke into your own house." Bobby sat, enjoying the food and the comfort of living in his father's praise. After the evening bath and dressed in his cotton pajamas, Bobby came out from the bedroom to see his mother and father sitting on the couch. He approached them both to climb up, but was hesitant, not sure where to put his foot. His father reached down and with a slight lift helped Bobby clamber up on the waiting laps of his mother and father. "Aren't you a handsome boy?" crooned his father. "Do you like your new pajamas?" "Yeah." "They sure are soft, aren't they?" Bobby nodded and grunted in reply as the two made affectionate exchanges with one another. In his father's gentle hands, Bobby luxuriated in tender affection. Bobby's pajama top raised up to show his belly button. Spotting this, his father said, "Oh, what's that? Do you know what that is?" Bobby looked down at his own navel and then up at his father questioningly. "That is the screw that connects to your bum. If we unscrew this here," his father pretended to fit a screwdriver into Bobby's navel. "No!" Bobby giggled and tried to pull his pajama top down. His father, seeing the pleasure Bobby was taking in this attention, blew a raspberry on his belly, and Bobby howled with giggles. Bobby's father repeated this a couple times more. Then, after a pause, his father said, "How about this?" He grabbed Bobby's right foot and raised it up so Bobby could see his own toes. "What are these, Bobby?" "Toes." "No, not toes. They're piggies." "No, toes." "Piggy toes," his father replied. Bobby's father proceeded to pinch each toe lightly, beginning with the smallest one. "This little piggy," do you know what he did? Bobby shook his head, wondering what was coming next. "This little piggy went to market," his father said. "Do you know what the market is? That means Piggy went to the store to buy groceries." His father then went to the next toe. "This little piggy stayed home." Each little piggy's description required his father's voice to raise slightly higher each time, and Bobby began to experience the wonder of anticipation, barely holding his giggles inside. "This little piggy had roast beef, and this little piggy had none." His father's voice paused with a moment of sadness at this last statement. But then in a moment of practiced anticipation he grabbed the biggest toe, saying, "And this little piggy—" He paused like the pause at the top of a roller coaster, sucking in a deep breath. Bobby's eyes were wild with thrills of terror and anticipation, mouth agape, waiting for the pronouncement. Ran wee 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 all the way home. Bobby's body arched in an orgasm of tickles, filling his body with pleasure and a paroxysm of laughter. In the moments of calm that followed, his father pressed his lips together against each foot in turn and blew raspberries so as to produce another round of gently ticklish kisses. "How about we do the other foot now?" Bobby pulled his foot away, squealing at the thought. Then, looking sideways at his father, he stuck his foot out a little, tempting fate. Bobby's father grabbed the foot, but Bobby pulled away. With prodding and encouragements, the next foot would be held and inspected, and the little piggy would once again find himself going to market. As the tickles diminished, Bobby's father asked him which piggy he wanted to be. Did he want to go to the market? Bobby shook his head, no. Did he want to stay home? Bobby did nothing. How about having roast beef? Again, Bobby shook his head, no. So how about having no food? Do you want to be that piggy? Again, no. But before his father could continue, Bobby blurted out, "Home!" "Oh, you want to be the wee-wee?" And as his father reached to tickle Bobby again, Bobby pushed his father's hand away and said, "No, home." "You want to stay home like the second piggy," he said. Bobby nodded. He wanted to stay home. On the other side of the world, in a different time but a similar age as Bobby, Yinlin and her mother were staying with Qianlong, who preferred that they live together at the army barracks. Qianlong was a respected senior officer, and the young men who served under his command spoke well of him. Yinlin loved these men who wore the same uniform as her father and represented the same care and attention she was accustomed to from him. Yinlin finished dinner and pulled away from the table. Running to the door, she paused at the entrance, scanning to see who was outside. She saw soldiers sitting around, enjoying the after-dinner break with quiet chatting. With a sudden strutting quality, Yinlin walked out into the center of the quiet roadway in front of the house. Yinlin held her head high and let her little girlish dress swing from side to side. She glanced about to see which of the soldiers noticed her. Walking down the steps onto the dirt road in front of her, she looked like a daughter of the sun who just landed on the planet, spreading her light for everyone's pleasure. Knowing that she was being observed, she bent down, pretending to inspect something on the ground. Then, hearing the revolutionary music playing in the loudspeakers nearby, she stood up straight. With her eyes casting in the direction of the men watching, she stuck her chest out, and with all the strength she had, sung the song her father taught her. Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong will stroll along with you. Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong will chat and laugh with you. One of the soldiers nudged the other, and smiling they watched her. Noting her audience, Yinlin turned and, still singing, walked slowly toward them. When the girl came to see me at night, the badge on her chest shone with heavenly light. If love and war become the same thing, keep on giving me strength, Mao Zedong. When the song came to an end, some soldiers looked down, others glanced warmly at each other, and at Yinlin. Yinlin felt safe among these men, like family. She understood that her song was appreciated and nothing more needed to be said. She leaned up against one young man's leg, named Comrade Ren. "Uh-oh, we need to do our work now," Comrade Ren said. "Do you want to walk with us a small way?" Her father was now at the entrance to the house, and showed agreement with the soldier's plan. Yinlin nodded her head and showed Comrade Ren a little stone she found. She said the stone was her treasure. Ren made a show of appreciation and said, "Wow, that is quite a treasure. I bet you can exchange that for enough congee and pork to feed the entire barracks. Then you would be a hero of the revolution." "Oh no," Yinlin replied. "I am keeping this in my box at home." Comrade Ren nudged her shoulder as they proceeded to walk with a happy, casual chatter. Yinlin continued walking with her little body stretched tall, shoulders back. Her voice, along with the soldiers, floated along the evening air, and like birds gathering in the trees, her eyes flitted about, seeking a place to land. After turning a corner and walking a small distance, they came to a building that looked odd in comparison to all the others. The red walls of this building rose higher than many, and were featureless with the exception of one small rectangular window high up on the wall. Yinlin stopped in front of this building and stared. With a sly look at Comrade Ren, another soldier, Comrade Chonglin, whispered to Yinlin, "Wow, what a strange-looking house. I wonder who lives there." Yinlin kept looking and observed, "It's ugly. Is it for poor people?" "Did you think it's so ugly?" Yinlin turned to walk away. Not yet noticing the solitary windows, she paused to ask, "Why does it have no windows?" The soldiers smiled. Yinlin looked again, trying to understand the strange nature of the house, when Ren Jihao bent down to her and whispered, "Where men sleep and never rise, ghosts will creep and never die." "What's that mean?" Yinlin asked. "That building there is the house of the dead." "What's that mean?" Yinlin asked again, her eyebrows furrowed with slight disturbance. "That house, little Miss Yin, is the house where we put people in after they die." He didn't explain to her that this is where the bodies were kept for medical practice. The building housed cadavers which were kept in formaldehyde, and even from a distance the faint whiff of the chemical was discernible. "Really?" Yinlin looked curious. "There are dead people in that house? Can we go inside and look?" Yinlin was afraid, but also very curious, and she felt that if she went with the soldiers she would of course be very safe. "No, we can't go inside. The house is locked. But if you really want to, maybe we can let you look in the window." At this time the daily songs playing on the loudspeakers stopped. There would be no more triumphant-sounding music till just before light the next morning. The sun was setting, and the soldiers' voices took a more hushed tone, as the music around them had stopped. The stillness after the loudspeakers went silent left a sudden emptiness in the sky, and every word and thought now seemed more alive than before, as if one was talking in one's sleep and then suddenly woke to one's own voice. "There are no windows," Yinlin protested in a lowered voice. "Well, there is one window, you see, up there on the wall. That is a window. I can probably lift you and let you look inside the window. Would you like that?" Comrade Ren asked. "Okay," Yinlin said, cautious but still curious. Looking harder, she now noticed the tiny window way at the top. "Okay, guys," he said to some of the soldiers near him. "Someone lift little Miss Yin, will you?" Comrade Ren stood close with his face toward the red building. One of the soldiers placed Yinlin on Comrade Ren's shoulder so that each of her legs fell to either side of his cheek. He felt the sole of her shoe scrape past his ear, and he grabbed her legs. With one hand on her right leg, and the left hand leaning against the red building, he said, "Okay, now, you need to grab my head and climb up so that you're standing on my shoulder. Can you do that?" "Uh-huh," she said. Yinlin wobbled a bit, her body swaying forward and back as she grasped what little she could of Comrade Ren's hair. "Ow, ow, easy. Someone watch behind her in case she falls back," Comrade Ren said. "Okay, now, Miss Yin, hold on to my head, and try to pull yourself up so that you're standing on my shoulders, not sitting." Yinlin did as she was told, and with a lot of scuffing and scratching she eventually stood on Comrade Ren's shoulder, holding his hair with one hand and reaching forward to lean on the red building with the other. The sun was just below the horizon now, and the walls of the building released their warmth against the cooling air. Everything was silent except the grunting of Comrade Ren and Yinlin's beating heart. Comrade Ren looked up past Yinlin's waving skirt and asked her if she could see in the window. Yinlin reached upward but could only get her hand on the edge of the window, unable to get a view inside. Okay, Comrade Ren said. "Let me catch you." He backed away from the wall and let Yinlin fall into his arms, setting her down gently back to the ground. Just wait. We can do it. Comrade Cheng, come here. I'm going to let Miss Yin on my shoulders, and then you're going to let me on your shoulders. Got it?" Comrade Cheng laughed and said, "Are you sure about this? We don't want to get Miss Yin hurt. Just let me get on. It's getting dark and we don't have much time. Come on, we're soldiers. We should be able to do this small thing. Okay, Miss Yin, you can climb on my shoulders again." Yinlin once again straddled her legs behind Comrade Ren's ears. She held his hair with both hands like she was riding a wild horse, completely absorbed in the adventure she had chanced upon. Comrade Ren then climbed onto Comrade Cheng's shoulders, and Comrade Cheng pushed himself upward with the help of a couple other soldiers. Comrade Ren shouted to the others, "Okay, guys, you need to gather around in case we lose our balance. You need to spot us." There was a commotion of talking as the human ladder pressed up against the building. Once again, Comrade Ren encouraged Yinlin. "Okay, little comrade, you need to stand up on my shoulders again. It's going to work this time. Just grab a hold of my head and pull yourself up. You see? You're very close to the window now." Yinlin struggled to get herself up on Comrade Ren's shoulders. She looked down beyond Comrade Ren and saw that below him was Comrade Cheng, and around them some other smiling and encouraging soldiers. Together they propped her up very high, and on top of Comrade Ren she was able to look all around. From up here she could see across the roofs of other low buildings and the movements of people. One hand rested against the building, and the other held Comrade Ren's hair tightly. But if she was going to look in the window, she would have to let go of Comrade Ren's head and stand up straight. Ahead of her, and very close to her face, was the dark window to the house of the dead. All that could be heard was the quiet grunting of the men below her. An orange and velvet western sky shaded out toward the night as darkness advanced from the east. Yinlin turned and looked uncertainly at the dark window, which appeared much different close up. She could see dust and silky strands of gray fluff hovering in the air. Her legs were unsteady, and the people underneath her a wobble. The wall was firm, rough, and warm, and the dark hole of the window was waiting. What does a dead person look like, she wondered. She stretched her body up from Comrade Ren's head, and using both hands, pressed against the red wall. She grabbed the edge of the opening and pulled her head forward to look in. She pulled her face close, closer, and peering deep into the darkness, saw nothing. But the nothing was not emptiness. There was something there. It was laying there, silent. The air outside was still and calm, but the air inside seemed to brood. "What do you see, Miss Yin? What does it look like inside?" The men below sounded curious, but she had little to report. "Nothing," she replied. And pushing herself a bit with her toes, she peered even more deeply, when a gust of cool air and a soft moan came from deep in the darkness. Yinlin's hair on the back of her neck bristled, and she lost balance. Falling backward, she tried, but failed to grasp Comrade Ren's hair, who reached behind himself and grabbed her leg as she dropped, falling head first, but suspended in the air by Comrade Ren's tight grip. Simultaneously, Comrade Ren lost his balance and began falling, and there was a surge of arms and bodies reaching out to catch Comrade Ren as he fell backwards, holding Yinlin by her leg. The result was a pile of grasping bodies laying in various positions on the ground below. Yinlin got up on her feet and dusted her dress off. Others quickly assisted her, also brushing her clothes and asking, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" So sorry, Miss Yin. I hope you're okay." Comrade Ren was down on one knee looking into Yinlin's face. Yinlin looked in Comrade Ren's eyes. She wasn't disturbed, actually. Comrade Ren saw her excitement. "What did you see, Miss Yin? Did you see the dead people?" At that moment Yinlin got distracted by another thing. she noticed how handsome Comrade Wren looked with his furry eyebrows. She brought her face right up to Comrade Wren's, reaching out and gently touching his eyebrow. She gazed at him, all around his face. It was merely a moment, and in that briefest of moments, Comrade Wren felt Yinlin's presence, larger than a child's, like two souls touching. Then, retrieving her hand, she looked back into his eyes and whispered, "No, but I heard a ghost." "Really? What did the ghost sound like?" Yinlin thought for a moment, then replied, "It sounded sad." Someone said that Yinlin should probably go home. There was general agreement among the soldiers, and they said goodbye to Yinlin. Comrade Wren walked Yinlin back toward her home, pointing her in the direction she should go. One of the ribbons on Yinlin's dress had come loose. Yinlin shivered and hurried up the steps and back into the comfort of her own home. Despite the pleasures of living with Qianlong at the barracks, Yinlin's mother Juyu insisted that she retain her job in Shanghai. This meant that there were extensive periods when the family lived apart, Yinlin and her mother in Shanghai, and her father at the military base. Today, Qianlong was returning home after 6 months away. Since early morning, the sounds and smells of fresh-made food permeated the house and the courtyard outside. Yinlin paced about continuously, keeping an eye on the street. She wandered back and forth between the outside counter where her mother was preparing the food, back into the house and across to the plastic-covered eating table, where she would sometimes sit, letting her legs swing back and forth. "Do something useful and put this on the table," her mother commanded from outside. Yinlin obliged, then stopped to stare at the food that was beginning to collect. She listened to the voices carry over from the street, and the clopping sound of hooves as people transported their goods or shouted greetings to one another. Sometimes a small motor could be heard. Yinlin felt something shudder. The normal sounds of the street could no longer be heard, overwhelmed as they were with a noise so loud and heavy that it was enough to shake the house even. It had to be an army truck. "Ah, Qian," Juyu uttered under her breath. It was always a happy time when Qianlong returned from his months away at the base. When he arrived home, no matter what time, day or night, it was always the same. Juyu dropped the food she was working on, quickly washed her hands, and without exactly drying them, she looked in the door at Yinlin. "Oh," she said, come here, quick!" She pushed a comb through Yinlin's hair. Then, dropping the comb, she brushed Yinlin's arms and dress with her hands. She stopped, looked at Yinlin, and with a thumb that was still wet, wiped a smudge of dirt off Yinlin's cheek, pressing hard enough to leave a red mark behind. Soldiers' voices floated up to their flat, as did the sound of slamming doors. The driver put the truck in gear and rumbled off. Juyu pulled Yinlin through the door just after the departing truck released a black gust of exhaust that enveloped Qianlong, so that he appeared to Juyu and Yinlin as if he had emerged out of the dragon's mouth. The smudge of air hovered around Qianlong's body, then dispersed as both Juyu and Yinlin advanced across the courtyard to the road to meet him. He gathered his 2 bags and started moving toward them. Juyu loved her man in a pressed uniform and shining shoes, and though he was not a tall man, he looked clean and handsome coming out of the dirt and danger of the world. She smiled and exclaimed, "Qian!" Yinlin ran to her dad and slammed into his leg for a hug, and Qianlong dropped his bags, reaching down to pat her back gently in a half embrace. Qianlong reached to his wife, but she quickly turned toward their home, lightly slapping his hand aside. Come, Yinlin, help your father with his bags." Juyu broke off toward the door and back to her food preparations outside. She chatted excitedly about everything and nothing while busily putting together some snacks on a dish. Qianlong titched at Yinlin, seeing that she was trying to drag one of the big gray travel bags, and with a wink said, "Here, you can help me." He picked up both bags, while Yinlin reached up to hold one of the handles and stumbled alongside her father so as to share in the lifting. He placed the bags on the floor in the center of the room and sat down beside the table. Yinlin, satisfied she had done her work, crawled up on her father's knee. Juyu brought in a dish with shrimp and onion omelet, cut into slices along with some salted peanuts on the side. She returned to prepare her tangyuan. Qianlong saw a dish of rice cake sitting there. "Oh, rice cake," he said. "You've been working so hard." "That's not me," Juyu said around the corner. "That comes from that wretched woman next door," she said in a loud whisper. "Our neighbor?" Qianlong said. "What's the problem?" "She wants to take advantage of us. She only gave us that cake to sweeten you up." "Really? Tastes good." "She's been talking about her son who's studying in Hefei. She says he doesn't get any good food and wonders how to send some of her home cooking to him. She asked me to test her rice cake and let me know how it tastes, because she plans to send it to him." "Oh, you could tell her it's delicious," he said. "Yes, but don't you see what she's doing?" "She wants our opinion." "Bah! She's going to persuade you to take some to her son on the way back to the base. Didn't you notice it?" Juyu carried on talking about how terrible the neighbors were, and how hard she worked, alternating between loud and obscure talking and quiet direct whispers while folding the tangyuan with fury and expertise. Qianlong listened a little, then shifted the conversation to tell of a humorous birthday prank the comrades had played on a particularly serious soldier, and also of an occasion when their personnel carrier got its axle broken during a heavy rain. While he told his stories, Juyu disappeared through the middle room to retrieve the watermelon from under their bed, which had been saved for Qianlong's arrival. Yinlin enjoyed this frenzied blur of good feeling, food, and chatter. It was good to be back on her father's knee, and she showed her smiling affection repeatedly, while telling her father that the garden at school is growing more, and, imitating her mother's tone, exclaimed, "How hard they've been working to take care of it." Juyu interjected about another neighbor who, seeking to gain benefits from them, had implied that since Qianlong was a soldier, perhaps he might be able to say something good to the local official who was asking questions about tools that had recently gone missing. Qianlong nodded and tried to sound understanding both of his wife and the neighbor, while being attentive of his daughter. Juyu took the watermelon outside to cut it, returning shortly to plop it down on the kitchen table. "Have some watermelon," she said. Then, looking at Yinlin, "If you work so hard at school, why don't you do anything to help your mother at home?" Yinlin patted her father's arm. "Papa, Papa, the boy in my class put a worm in my shoe." She attempted a childish frown, but it looked so cute that Qianlong just chuckled, exclaiming back to her with animation, "A worm! My goodness!" and rubbed her back. Yinlin's father whispered into her ear, "How about getting off my knee and let your father open his bags? I might have something here for you." Qianlong got up, placing Yinlin on her feet, and tugged the bag toward him, where he spread the handles and unzipped the center. Yinlin could not contain her excitement. She rubbed her hands on her legs and looked down at her father's things with wide eyes. "Father brought me something," she thought. "What could it be?" She looked down, leaning over while neatly folding her hands in front of her. Then impulsively she turned, flapping her arms while dancing and prancing about the room. She ran to her mother as she entered through the door. "Papa brought gifts!" she exclaimed. "Why not settle down, you?" her mother scolded. "Of course your father brought you something. Don't be so excited. Didn't I bring you some watermelon now? You didn't even notice it." Yinlin lowered her head slightly and returned to watch her father as she rocked up and down on her tiptoes, a half smile forming on her gaping mouth. "Let's see, I thought I put it in here," her father said. He was pretending for effect. He didn't look up at Yinlin, but knew she was watching intently. "Oh, dear, now where did I put it?" Could I have left it on the base? He asked himself quietly. He moved his clothes and removed a few packages wrapped in brown paper, laying them on the floor next to him. He paused his searching for a moment, scratching his head. "Never mind," her mother interjected. "When you unpack it, you can give it to her later." Her mother placed a piece of watermelon in Yinlin's hand, saying firmly, "Eat." Yinlin glanced at her mother and the watermelon, then returned her attention back to father. Bending down again, her father said, "Here it is." He pulled out a box the size of a pack of cigars. "What's that?" Yinlin nearly shouted, no longer able to contain her excitement. The box was red, white, and gold, with an image of a girl blowing a big bubble. The words on the front said "Pow Pow Tang." It was bubble gum. Yinlin fell to her knees, dropped the watermelon beside her on the floor, and reached out for the box. The box was heavy and slipped from her hands. "Here, let me help you," her father said. He opened the box just enough that Yinlin was able to completely open it the rest of the way. Inside were many smaller packages, perhaps 40 or 50. They were small tubes of gum in a glossy paper wrap. Each individual wrapper was colored the same as the box, and also had the image of the girl. Yinlin looked up at her father. "Take one," her father said. Her mother handed some watermelon to Yinlin's father and said, "Come, sit down," and she proceeded to sit at the table, indicating he should follow. Yinlin took one package and opened it, biting into it and tearing off a piece. Yinlin's mouth soon flooded with a sweet, fruity flavor as the firm, gummy flesh began to soften in her mouth. "Chew it, but don't swallow," her father said. Yinlin nodded her head, saying, "Mmm." "How does that taste?" he asked. Walking around, she demonstrated how well she could chew. "Good," she managed to say, while thinking to herself how cool her dad is. Looking at the girl on the package, she tried blowing a bubble. She made several attempts, with blowing and sucking, eventually trying to flatten the gum with her fingers and press it between her lips. This brought mild success and more happiness as Yinlin returned to look at the beautiful box, and marveled at how many shiny little wraps there were. Being in the army gave Qianlong and his family many benefits. Because of his talent and willingness, the army encouraged Qianlong to go to Beijing, where he could improve his skill and gain a promotion. During his studies there, Qianlong's talent was recognized yet further, and the Beijing leader asked him to stay, but Qianlong did not like living so far from his family. He applied to a district that was further south and closer to Shanghai. His transfer request to Anhui province was accepted, and soon afterward his superiors once again recognized his talent, and they too encouraged Qianlong to take officer training in Hefei. Qianlong demonstrated reluctance toward these honors, showing little desire for status or authority in the military, preferring rather to be close to his family. Being a member of the military also accorded Qianlong social privilege. During this time, fruit, such as watermelon, if you were lucky to have it, was a treat saved for a special day. Having a meal of chicken was rare, every piece precious. Even the lining of the chicken's stomach could be dried under the sun and taken to the medicine store, where, if it was in good condition, you could exchange it for 3 fen. If it was torn, perhaps only 2 fen. Yinlin had once taken such a piece of torn, dried chicken to the medicine store, but because of her father she got special favor and the shopkeeper gave 3 fen. With this money, if she wanted, Yinlin could purchase one small piece of gum. In a time when most people worked carefully to maintain a sufficient quantity of rice on their table, even a single piece of gum was an extravagance. Yinlin came from a family that had chicken and watermelon, and today Yinlin learned that she was the owner of a large box full of gum. She was the richest kid in the world. Yinlin wanted to share her good fortune with her classmates. The following day, as the children pulled out their mats to prepare for their afternoon sleep, Yinlin secretly and quickly laid a finger of gum on each child's mat before they lay down to rest. One by one, the youngsters began to realize the treasure that lay on their pillows. Curious, they picked up their packages and looked around. Wide-eyed expressions signaled the questions they had. What is this? What am I supposed to do? Someone whispered, "Open it." Soon one child after another realized the delicious taste of gum, and the room bubbled with sugary delight. Each one spoke excitedly with the other, and between chews asked, "Why did we get this?" "Bite it and chew, don't swallow. Isn't it delicious?" Several of them, discovering that Yinlin was the source, crowded around her to ask where she got it from. Yinlin was delighted to talk about how good her father was, and eagerly showed her bubble-blowing expertise despite having not really mastered it herself. To the teacher it was obvious who was at the center of all the not sleeping that had suddenly taken over the room. As a result, despite the happy attention from her classmates, Yinlin was sent to stand with her face toward the corner, as each child was commanded to hand over, or spit out, their recently acquired treasure. Yinlin snuck glances behind her. Several children were looking chastened and sad. Chastened because of being discovered doing something not allowed, and sad because they lost face with their teacher, but more sad because of the gum itself. The experience for most of the children had been a moment of heavenly blessing. It was not just the gum and its sweet taste. It was also the way the gum appeared out of nowhere beyond any expectation. For a moment, the children had been transported to a place of unanticipated joy and wonder. Life suddenly exposed her happy face and delivered a gift of pure generosity. Then, equally suddenly, that very same delight of life was forcefully taken away, replaced with the reproach of the teacher and corresponding guilt. The students now felt unworthy. It was worse than if they had never seen the gum in the first place. Yinlin wondered to herself how such a good thing like gum had gone so badly. Every morning when she went to school, her mother would say to her, "Be good." Yinlin always wanted to be good, but the harder she tried, the more trouble she got into. She remembered the incident with the balloons and rubbed her arms, unconsciously feeling as if the ribbons were there. As Yinlin stood in the corner and the other students grew gently asleep, Yinlin overheard a couple of teachers talking quietly to each other. "I wish I wasn't so tired. I could lay down right now and sleep like those children." "I know what you mean. If sleep doesn't soon bring us relief, death will." "Yes, sleep or death. They are brothers." The circle of Bobby's world was much smaller than Yinlin's. There was no school for children his age, so Bobby's world was defined by events at home, where Bobby was the sentinel in charge of watching the door. He was very good at that. Not only so, but Bobby also learned how to phone the police, in case something happens. Under the black phone in his mom and dad's bedroom was a piece of paper, and on that paper was a phone number. Bobby was expected to be able to call that number, and to ensure his success, Bobby's mother made him practice dialing. It was hard turning the dial. His little fingers could easily dial the 1, 2, and 3, but it was harder turning the dial for the larger numbers. 0 was especially difficult and needed extra fingers to push against the spring that returns the rotary back to its original position and hold the phone in place at the same time. Under his mother's supervision and with her encouragement, he read the paper himself and dialed all the numbers. The phone started ringing. "Give to Mummy, let me listen." She took the receiver from Bobby and listened. Someone could be heard on the other side. Then his mother said, "Hello? Yes, sorry. My son just dialed the phone. It won't happen again." She hung up. At first, Bobby thought he did something wrong. Then she looked at him, smiling, and said, "Good job, Bobby. You did it. You read the numbers, and you dialed them properly, you see? You can do it." Bobby felt comforted that he was capable. "So I phone the police if something bad happens," Bobby said, looking up at his mom. "Yes, but don't worry about it. Maybe you will never need to use this number, but you know where it is and you know how to dial it. If you want to practice dialing, you can turn the dial without taking the phone off the cradle, you see? Just leave the phone here and dial like this, and nothing will happen, but if you really need to phone someone, you take the phone off the hook like this." Bobby showed he understood, and many times after that he practiced dialing the numbers. "Okay, you go play." He was 3 years old at the time. It never occurred to Bobby to wonder why he should check the door, or learn to dial the police. He was simply happy to be given responsibilities. It would be many months later when he learned the context of his responsibilities. It was a gray mid-November morning. Bobby was in the basement looking for something to do while his mother washed clothes. The lights were on, and everywhere the house was cool. Along the far concrete wall was Bobby's bouncy horse. It was mounted on a metal frame with tight springs attached to either side. He had this toy since his first birthday, but it took several years before he was able to climb onto it, which, because of the springs, was a shaky and effortful ordeal. Once he learned to mount the horse, he was able to rock it back and forth in deep, springy dips and bows. It was tippy and took effort, but there was some pleasure in the gentle swaying that this toy provided once he was squarely in the saddle. His pleasure in the horse lasted only for a time. Today he was uninterested, and he continued to explore. Bobby walked toward the metal shelf against the wall next to the wash machine. Standing on his toes and scanning the shelf, he spied the wooden decorative cats his grandfather had sent several Christmases ago. He reached out and grabbed them, running his fingers over their smooth surfaces and the artificial gemstone eyes. Their lacquer taste he recalled from his baby days as an unpleasant memory, and his memory combined with their hardness made the cats unfriendly to him. It annoyed him that the cats were all connected together by their leather tails. In general, they didn't make good playthings, and in fact, they were designed as tabletop decorations, not toys for toddlers. He soon lost interest. He stopped to look at the rubber boots his grandfather had also sent. "Those boots don't fit," Bobby's mother said. She complained out loud that they were pink and that her father didn't seem to remember that her son was a boy, not a girl. It was not just family, but the larger world often reinforced this identity confusion. Bobby and his mother would be grocery shopping, for example, and someone stopping by looked at Bobby and wondered what a cute girl he was, until his mother corrected, "Thank you, he's a boy." "A boy? Oh dear, I didn't see that. Maybe he should be a girl, eh? It's hard to know when boys have their hair so long these days, isn't it?" In the stockroom somewhere a radio was playing. The Beatles could be heard singing, "She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah." His mother turned to ignore the fellow shopper. Bobby could tell when his mother was unhappy. She didn't like the comments the lady made in the grocery store, and she was also annoyed with Grandpa. But when she was unhappy with these people, it felt as if she was unhappy with Bobby at the same time. He didn't want to hear any more, so he left the boots alone and wandered back to his toy horse, where he ran his hand on the plastic surface. The toy horse was firm but not exactly hard. There was a cool fleshiness to the horse, and he let his hands flow along the smooth plastic mane. then the raised front leg of the horse, over the hoof, following the shape with his finger, and back to the brown saddle, all the way back to the extended tail. While he explored the horse this way, he watched his mother fill a bucket of soapy water in the big sink. Leaving the bucket there, she grabbed the clothes basket and told Bobby to come upstairs with her. Once upstairs, Bobby was able to clamber into his toy Jaguar where he played while his mother went outside. After hanging the laundry, Bobby's mother went downstairs to grab the water bucket, which she brought and placed on the kitchen floor. It was still steaming and had lots of bubbles which slipped down the side of the bucket. She intended to wash something, perhaps the floor, but she sat down at the kitchen table instead. After a few moments she told Bobby she was not feeling well and would lie down for a little sleep. She disappeared out the kitchen. The morning sun, which was just peeking through the window, filled the kitchen with the promise of a brilliant day. While keeping the cold air outside, the window allowed the sun to warm the room and remove the chill from the walls and floor. The house became noticeably silent. Bobby was not accustomed to his mother taking a nap so early in the morning. He sat in his Jaguar. It appeared as if he was investigating the side of the car from his position sitting in the driver's seat, but actually his attention was drifting. His mind, normally full with the noise of car sounds, air brakes from trucks, and the stop-and-go of street-like traffic, was silent now, as Bobby's mind seemed to float. The floor creaked, and sound, all the way to the kitchen ceiling, seemed absent. In the silence, Bobby ran his hands along the hard plastic of the red Jaguar, just as he did with the horse. Behind his seat there was a little trunk which could be forced open to store small items. He snapped the trunk shut. "Ouch," he said quietly, pinching his finger as he did so. He turned from the trunk, sat straight, and let his eyes wander to the bucket of soapy water, and watched as a large clump of bubbles, having now slid down the side of the bucket, had come to rest on the floor, glistening white. Bobby got out of his Jaguar and approached the bucket. He heard the quiet sound of bubbles popping like the patter of small ice crystals falling from the sky. He reached his hand out and felt their soft resistance, which was more welcoming than the hardness of the decorative cats. These bubbles smelled fresh, and they jiggled when Bobby bumped into the bucket. He scooped a small amount with his hand and sat on the floor, spreading the suds in an arc around him. Rubbing back and forth, he felt how smooth the floor was. Curious, he got up and reached down deeper into the bucket to touch the water and found that there were far more bubbles than water. He felt a coolness on his foot. As he leaned with one hand on each side of the bucket, he looked down at his foot and saw that his sock was all wet. He didn't like the wet sock feeling. Sitting down again, he pulled off his socks and returned to the bucket, with one foot on dry floor and one foot on bubbles. The feeling that struck him as his foot contacted the soapy surface was unspeakable. He rubbed his foot back and forth. Smooth, soft, like downy baby kitten fur, and no friction at all. This sensation entered through his foot into his entire body. Life itself was smooth, and it smelled wonderful like flowers. He reached into the bucket, scooped out more bubbles, and put them on the floor. Now he slid on both feet. "I'm skating," he thought, as he found himself immersed in the experience of no friction, no resistance. Over and over again he repeated his foot-sliding motions in pure delight. He was floating, dreaming, marveling at the pleasure he discovered on this ordinary day. With little conscious awareness, Bobby moved around to the back side of the bucket, and placing his hands on the rim, pushed it over. With a sudden release, all the water and bubbles spread across the kitchen floor, creating a harbor of soapy islands. He moved out into the center of the floor, sliding his feet this way and that, first on this pile of bubbles, then sliding from there to another pile of bubbles. He was totally detached from the familiar world of hard, edgy, and bad-tasting surfaces into this strange, slidey world of soft suds. Bobby soon slipped and fell. He turned on all fours, now wet and slippery, and worked himself back up onto his feet, where he continued to swish, swish his feet back and forth. Light through the kitchen window brought a rainbow of color to the bubbles, affirming the gentle sweetness of life. This is what angel life must be like. Of course, he never said or thought these words. He simply felt it, felt the experience through his entire body. It is hard to say how long this lasted. Was it minutes? Had an hour passed? Bobby had entered eternity, knowing and experiencing only bliss. "What's going on here?" His mother's voice suddenly burst through the heavens in judgment. "What a mess!" Anger broke through the bubbles, and seeing her, Bobby slipped and fell, looking up. She stared hard at him. "What are you doing?" Her angry look demanded an answer. Blinking, he looked up and replied, "Skating." Suddenly aware that the veil to the curtain had been torn, and the glory of God left the temple. He was in a kitchen, with an angry mother. His clothes were wet, and the floor was cold. "Didn't I tell you I'm not feeling very well?" she half shouted. "Get out of here! I need to clean this mess up." Bobby went into the living room and climbed onto the couch. Inside, he felt as if razors had cut him. Beauty had abandoned him and was replaced with searing pain and loneliness. "Not with your wet clothes!" she shouted. She disappeared into his room and came back with a little dry shirt, pants, underwear, and socks. She removed his wet clothes roughly. He didn't say a word, but she did. "Didn't Mummy tell you she's not feeling well? I need you to behave. This is too much work for me when I need to lay down." These words and others like them came out of her mouth, each one causing him to bleed inside. He wanted to hide. Once in dry clothes, Bobby climbed onto the couch. He lay there with his arm hanging down. Sadness became his home. He listened as his mother made suppressed, angry sounds in the other room. She shouted, "You know this might ruin the floor. What if Mummy didn't wake up? Oh, I feel so sick and I'm climbing around on the floor mopping up this mess." The volume of her complaints lowered, and it sounded more as if she were talking to herself than Bobby. By this time, Bobby was only half paying attention. He looked at the threads of the couch he was laying on as they wrapped around the piping along the edges of the cushion. He then looked out to the floor where he saw his ESO cards in a pile. These cards were similar to baseball or hockey cards, but the main character on each card was a car. One card had a yellow Mustang on it, another had a red Laurentian. There was a black Corvair like the one his mother drove. Various cars of one sort and another. They were not photorealistic, but close enough to seem like the real thing. Bobby's father collected these cards from the gas station attendants in little silver and blue packets every time he filled with gas. Whenever his father showed up, he would nearly always have another packet or two of cards to pass on to Bobby. Because the pictures were randomly distributed, Bobby had 2, 3, or 4 copies of several cars. The cards were collectibles and even had plastic holders for storing them, but Bobby used the cards to play a memory game. Bobby, drawn by the pile laying on the floor, got off the couch and lined up his cards row by row, upside down, and then turning the cards one by one, he tried to remember if other cards of the same make and model of car had been turned over recently. If he found a match, he paired the cards together and put them in a discard pile. Bobby wondered why his father hadn't given him any cards recently, and when he would be home again. Bobby got hungry. He was afraid to bother his mother, who had gone back to bed. He stood with the spare room door to his left, facing the open silence of his mom and dad's bedroom. In a quiet voice, he said, "I'm hungry." Silence. He stood for a while looking through the bedroom door, observing the bare gray walls, and said it again. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Somewhere in the house a clock could be heard ticking. "Mommy." There was a prolonged silence. His mother's voice came out of the silence. "Bobby, I can't get up now. Take the Cheerios out of the cupboard. You can eat those." Bobby turned to the kitchen and found the Cheerios, which he grabbed with both hands. The box was big compared to his small body, and he had to reach deep inside to get the cereal. It was a big reach, and to make things easier, he lifted the box and poured the cereal onto the couch. Climbing onto the couch, he was able to pick one, then another Cheerio with his fingers and put them in his mouth. They tasted good, and time passed as he chewed and swallowed, one after another little round circle. The house grew silent again, and the afternoon was marked by the slow movement of shadows cast in the living room. Bobby found things to occupy himself, then grew sleepy. The late afternoon darkness and silence of the house, the ticking of the clock, all had a soporific effect on Bobby, who climbed the couch and fell asleep awkwardly with one arm folded under his chest. The house, the place which had once glowed with the radiance of heaven, was now motionless and cool. Sometime during his nap a blanket appeared on his now comfortably adjusted body, and a pillow softened the weight on his head. The curtains had been drawn over the windows, through which the gray snow could be seen on the inactive neighborhood street. The living room lamp was turned on dim, and did little to illuminate the dark corners of the room. Bobby opened his eyes. His body had been moved so that from his spot on the couch he could see his mother cooking supper through the kitchen entrance. He felt the softness and warmth of his pillow and blanket. The sounds and smells of frying onions and hamburger spread its warm aroma into the living room. Potatoes were on the stove. It seemed that everything was better again. Normal. His mother looked all right. Hearing some noise from the living room, Bobby's mother declared, "Dinner will be ready soon, Bobby. Go to the bathroom and wash your hands, then you can sit up." Bobby's mother started placing dishes, and soon they were at the table eating. Bobby's mother mashed his potatoes for him and put butter on. As she did so, she explained to Bobby, "I need to tell you something, Bobby. Can you listen to me?" Bobby swallowed the yummy hamburger and nodded his head. "Your mommy didn't feel well today, but it's not your fault. I feel better now, but you should also know that Mommy can't always watch you. Sometimes I get sick, like today. When I'm sleeping in the bed, you just need to play with your toys. I don't want to see things like the spilled water on the floor again." Bobby nodded his head, but didn't understand why his mummy would be sick sometimes. As most children do, Bobby took the world at face value, and if he didn't understand it, he accepted it. Everything was okay now, and he didn't need to worry. Playing alone was not unusual for him. The evening passed. Dinner was finished. Bobby played in the living room with the comforting sounds of his mother in the kitchen. Later, his mother sat on the couch and turned on the TV. Bobby was in his pajamas by then, and the Smothers Brothers was just ending. Noticing this, Bobby felt a moment of disappointment because the end of Smothers Brothers was the signal that it was time for Bobby to go to bed. However, when the Ed Sullivan Show came on, Bobby realized he was being allowed to stay up a bit later, and he felt happy for this. They watched George Hamilton in his brown suede jacket with shiny blue shoulder harness and the zipper all the way down, exposing his forest of brown chest hair protruding out from his shirtless body. He sang, "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry," and then followed it with a gospel song, "I Saw the Light." His performance had the same strange mix of down-home spirituality with seductive glamour that Elvis Presley conveyed in his early career. The phone rang, and Bobby's mother went to her bedroom to answer it. Bobby could hear that it was his mother's friend Camille. He continued to play with the toy car, when shortly a gasp of surprise broke through his awareness, and his ears perked up. From the bedroom he heard his mother saying, "No," in disbelief at something she was hearing. Bobby became more attentive as it simultaneously grew quieter in the bedroom. Camille was talking and his mother was listening. Bobby could tell there was something fearful in his mother's silence. Then, quieter and barely discernible to Bobby, he could hear her ask, "What did Joey do then?" Joey was Ben's older brother, and from what Bobby heard, there had been some sort of a fight, and it seemed serious. The look on his mother's face showed that she was very much disturbed by what she heard on the phone. Just then there was a loud bang, like the sound of a heavy book being dropped on the floor, but deeper. It was coming from the kitchen. Bobby stood up. His mother interrupted Camille and said, "Hang on a minute, I need to check something." Bobby's mother came out of the bedroom and went to the kitchen. Bobby followed. The lights in the kitchen were already off, and the warm kitchen smells had dissipated. His mother went to the window and lifted the corner of the curtain to look outside. Bobby could see by the light of the stars and the moon that the MG was parked there, which meant his dad was at the door. Ben's voice broke through the silence. He could be heard through both doors from the kitchen, the door above the landing and the outside door where Ben stood, as well as through the windows. "Hannah, why's the door locked? Come open the door," he shouted. Bobby's mum turned and picked up the extension phone that was on the counter. "It's Ben," she said into the phone. Her voice sounded tense. Bobby hadn't seen his dad for a while and started toward the door to unlock it, but his mother held him back. "Bobby, don't open it," she whispered. He could hear his dad talking. "Hannah, I know you're there. Please open the door. Why did you go and lock it?" Bobby's mother spoke in whispers on the phone to Camille. "What should I do? I don't know what to do. Should I let him in?" She listened as Camille had things to say. Again Ben banged on the door, this time more like a knock, not so loud. "Honey, we need to talk," he said. "But you need to let me in. It's cold out here." "And dark?" thought Bobby. Bobby was confused by the mix of angry and sad sounds coming from his father. His mother saw Bobby standing there, his face open with worry. "Bobby, go to the bathroom and get ready for bed," she said. Bobby turned to go, but once again the banging returned, and Ben's voice rose again. "Hannah, If you don't open this door, I'm going to kick it open. He says he's going to kick the door in, Hannah spoke into the phone. Bobby's fear was the same as when his father caught him with the pens, but worse. Open the door, he shouted. Again, a loud bang. Hannah, I just want to talk. Why did you lock the door? His words spoke both tenderness and threat. He said things like honey and dear and then switched to demands. Bobby remained captive to the drama playing out before him. He continued to stand just inside the entrance of the kitchen. It got quiet again outside. Did his father leave? While his mother whispered some words to Camille, Bobby could hear the doorknob gently tested at the front of the house behind him. Then quiet again. His mother held to the phone, motionless. Hannah, you listen to me. The voice was coming from the back again. He was speaking in a firm, loud, and steady voice. I'm going to count to 5. If you don't unlock the door at 5, I'm going to kick it in. He started counting. Bobby's mother spoke into the phone again. What should I do? She asked. Camille counseled Hannah not to open the door and to stay on the phone. Perhaps she thought that Ben would not be able to burst the door, or would not follow through on his threat. Bobby's father was counting. 3, 4, 5. His voice got quieter on 4 and 5. Then the banging started, louder than before. Bobby, drawn by the sound, moved toward the middle of the kitchen, staring at the entrance. The door that his father was kicking was the door at the bottom of the landing. The door Bobby ensured was locked all the time. The inside second door was closed. Bang! Loud. Bang! Louder. Even the floor seemed to shake a bit. Then bang! Something gave way, like breaking a popsicle stick, but louder. Something changed in the air, and Bobby knew the door had been broken. The inner door opened, and there was his father. He lunged toward Bobby's mother, who shouted, "Call the police!" dropping the phone on the counter and disappearing out the front door. Bobby's father followed, out into the night. Bobby stood alone in the kitchen, looking out the open front door with the snow and glistening starlight outside. He wondered why his mother ran outside in her sock feet. It would be cold. Standing there in the kitchen, looking at the phone which had now fallen to the floor, then at the open door with the clear and sparkling darkness outside, the cool air coming in, Bobby recalled his mother's words that he should phone the police and went to the bedroom. He looked under the phone where the paper with the number was. Picking up the receiver, he began to dial the police. As the dialer was spinning, Camille's voice could be heard. She remained on the phone until this time. "Hello?" she said. At first Bobby didn't notice it. He didn't expect the sound of a voice to come so quickly. He thought he needed to keep dialing the phone to talk, so again he turned the rotary dialer. "Hello? Is somebody there?" Camille kept speaking through the ticking sound of the dial. There was a pause. "Bobby? Is that you, honey?" Bobby suddenly recognized his name and stopped dialing. "Bobby, this is Camille. Can you hear me? Can you talk to me, sweetheart?" "Yes," Bobby said. "Who are you trying to call, Bobby?" "The police." "Oh, sweetie, you don't have to worry. We already called the police. They know what is happening and are on their way. You don't need to worry. Where are your mommy and daddy right now?" "They went outside." "I see. So you are alone in the house, is that right?" "Yes." "Are you okay, sweetie?" Is everything okay? Suddenly Bobby began to feel a bit safer, and feeling safe, he noticed he was cold. I'm cold, he said. You're cold? Is the door open? Yes. Okay, Bobby. The police are coming soon. Until they come, you can just talk with me, okay? But first I want you to do a few things. Camille proceeded to accompany Bobby, advising him to take his blanket into his mother's bedroom where it was warmer and close the door. He could talk to her on the extension there. She asked Bobby to explain what happened, and as he spoke, he began crying. Eventually, Bobby heard some sounds in the house, and Camille told him the police were already there. He should probably just stay in the room and hang up the phone. Don't worry, sweetheart, you'll be okay. Your mommy and daddy are just having some problems, but the police are there to help. You just stay there in the bedroom. Someone will come and get you soon. Sure enough, there was a gentle knock on the bedroom door. A policewoman poked her head through the door, speaking softly and cheerfully to Bobby. Hello there. My name is Constable Reynolds. I'm a police officer. You must be Bobby, is that right? Bobby nodded. Do you want to come with me? She asked, holding her hand out. Your father's here in the kitchen. You can sit with him. He says he misses you. Bobby must have looked frightened because the officer said, It's all right. Everything's okay. Where's Mommy? Bobby asked. She's in the other room with another officer. They're talking right now. After that, the officer will talk with your dad. Do you want to come with me? She said, as she held her hand out. Come on. Bobby followed her, and coming around the kitchen, he saw his father sitting at the table. The officer said, You can sit here, and pulled out a chair. Bobby noticed just then that the police lady was wearing her boots in the house, and there were clumps of snow and melted ice on the kitchen floor. As Bobby climbed onto the chair, he looked up at his father. He saw his dad's gentle smile and twinkling eyes. His dad reached into his pocket, pulling out a pack of Wrigley's spearmint gum. He slid a stick partway out of the pack and offered it to Bobby. Do you want one? Bobby missed his dad and felt happy to see him. He took the gum, and his father also rolled up a piece and put it in his mouth. Bobby's socks were wet again, and the floor was cold, but his father spoke warmly. What have you been doing these days? He asked. And Bobby told him about skating on the floor, and Mommy being sick, and all the things he could remember. His father listened attentively, smiling, and then asked Bobby if he had any questions he wanted to ask his daddy. Did you bring any cards from the gas station? No, he replied. I have 3 packs, but I don't have them with me. Okay. Are you going to stay home now? Bobby's father seemed unable to give a clear answer. The night grew long. You look cold, son. Why not come sit on my lap? Bobby climbed over to his dad and enjoyed being held. It took a while before the police left, and Bobby fell asleep at some point. By morning his father was gone, and Bobby found himself once again, clean and dry, in his own bed. Yin woke, her head partially covered by the blanket, feeling the cold air against her exposed forehead. Under the covers it was very warm, and she wriggled her body more deeply into the bedding, enjoying the warmth where her grandmother had just been. The government recognized that winter conditions were hard on the people, and continuous improvements to the living standards meant improvements through the provision of central heating. If you lived in the north, that is. The determining question was, how far north does a person need to live in order to qualify for central heating? The Yangtze River, which flows west to east across most of China, was the commonly accepted center line. However, this line, being a river, meandered both south and north, creating a 200-kilometer deviation of center. For those living near the river, however, the dividing line was very clear. Homes on the northern shore had central heating, while those on the opposite shore were apparently warm enough. Yinlin's family lived in Shanghai, which placed them on the southern shore, and they were thus a warm city and didn't require heat. Yinlin slept with her grandmother since she moved in a few weeks earlier. Ju Jiang had passed away several years ago, and Wu Wen found it difficult to live alone. She kept her house, but had some furniture, especially the large redwood bed, moved to Yinlin's home. Here she sat, quietly laying out clothes for Yinlin to change into for the day. From her position on the bed, Wu Wen could look through the door to observe Yinlin's mother gathering pots for the morning meal. Yinlin, laying in her cocoon of warmth, drifted in and out of sleep, snuggling in the pleasure she felt now that her father was home again. He had been away since he brought the box of gum last summer, and apart from her brief stay at the barracks in August, this was the first time for her to be together with him once again in their home. During the August visit to the military base, Yinlin accompanied her father to a nearby multi-purpose hall. In this building, soldiers practiced drills, played sports, or gathered for ceremonies and presentations. Yinlin followed her father through the entrance. The building was both empty and spacious, with natural light and open-air ventilation, allowing it to be cool on a hot day. Along the far wall was a stage, and above the stage Chairman Mao's reassuring, Buddha-like image was mounted. Yinlin's father was here to arrange an awards ceremony and planned to work out some details with a few junior soldiers. Left to her own devices, Yinlin wandered upstairs to explore. Reaching the top, she rounded the corner which opened to a soldier's dormitory. As Yinlin entered the room, she saw the beds all neatly made and regularly spaced apart in rows. On each bed, the soldiers had their bedding folded. Yinlin was impressed that there was not a single wrinkle. So tightly were the bed sheets rolled. She glanced around and observed shelving for clothes and personal items. A row of sewing machines lined the wall closest to the stairwell, and there were tables at the far corner in which various games were set up, including a board of Chinese checkers. While the hall below was quite large, the upper floor had perhaps half the floor space and a much lower ceiling. Compared to the vast hall downstairs, this area felt close and warm to Yinlin, filled as it was with signs of personal care and domestic comfort. Despite her solitude, Yinlin felt as if she were surrounded by goodwill and welcome. A repair job was underway, in which a light fixture for the great hall below was being replaced. This light fixture was accessed through the flooring in the soldiers' quarters, but the repair wasn't finished, and a sizable hole, showing clear through to the floor below, was left to be completed another day. The soldiers had a reckless sense of humor, and instead of marking the hole carefully, they disguised the hole by laying a newspaper over it, a devious trap for their unsuspecting comrades. Yinlin, spying the game tables at the back of the room, ran toward them, and as she came to stop in front of the Chinese checkers, she placed all her weight on the newspaper, which presented no resistance at all, and allowed her entire leg to drop, catching several slivers along the rough wood edge. Her body fell downward while her right foot slipped sideways, and the full weight of her body landed crosswise against the edge of the cut. Yinlin, shocked and in great pain, clambered back out of the hole. Her first and dominant feeling was one of shame. She felt she had done something wrong, and the blood trickling down her leg and into her shoes was going to incriminate her. Yinlin ran the short distance back to where they were staying, and up the stairs. Slipping quietly through the door, she glanced about, looking to see if her mother was in. Finding the room empty, she located a small dry cloth in a basket in the corner, folded it up, and rolled it as tight as she could. She placed the dry cloth under her legs and pushed hard. Pulling it back for a look, she saw a big spot of fresh blood had already stained the cloth. She pushed the cloth back and pulled her underclothes up to hold the cloth there. Trying to keep the cloth in place, she waddled back to the hall and found a bench at the back where she could put pressure on the wound by sitting. She picked carefully at the slivers that had stuck in her leg and realized she would need to go back and wipe the blood off the floor and wash her feet and shoes. As soon as she calmed down and the pain subsided, she threw out her underwear and the cloth. Returning home, she got another rag and fresh underwear. Wetting the rag, she returned to the dorm, wiping the blood off the stairs, and found another newspaper to cover the hole in the floor once again. It took several days before Yinlin could toilet without pain. Walking or moving about was not easy. She dreaded going to the shower with her mother because her mother always washed under there, making her feel uncomfortable, but this time it would surely hurt more. It was the next day before they used the communal shower, and as soon as Yinlin got undressed, she saw a flap of skin hanging down and quickly pulled it off so her mother wouldn't notice. This drew fresh blood, but went unnoticed in the shower. The washing was uncomfortable as expected, but Yinlin's mother never noticed or suspected anything. Yinlin lay in bed recalling these thoughts in her mind. She squeezed her legs. Thankfully, all pain in that area was a distant memory. Her mind cleared as she woke up more fully. Thinking of these events made her recall a conversation between her mother and father that had taken place earlier in the visit. "Why don't you and Yinlin stay with me?" Qianlong said to Yinlin's mother one evening after they had completed dinner. "You mean with the army?" Juyu asked. "All the family could be together and everything is done for you. The food is prepared and there's plenty of it. You don't need to get food supplies or cook or even clean except our room. There are plenty of other military families, which means both you and Yinlin would not be lonely. And above all, the soldiers are very good to Yinlin." "This is no place for Yinlin," she replied. "Why not? Don't you see how happy she is? She's singing and playing all the time." "Bah!" she scoffed, attempting to simply disregard the suggestion. "What is bah? I'm serious," Qianlong said. "Those people are from other provinces. They are just belonging people." "Belonging people?" "Yes, they just come here because they want army hukou. They want to belong to the army." "Of course they want army hukou. This is their home now. We can have army hukou also." "I don't want army hukou," Juyu replied a bit forcefully. "And I don't want to share hukou with these people." "What do you mean, these people? These are my colleagues." "Phew," she scoffed. "That kind of people. They are too low." "In the army, we're all the same. We're brothers and sisters." "Really? What about the time we went to dinner with your brothers and sisters, the Zhang family? Do you remember that?" "You mean the last time I was on leave? We took that driving holiday." "Yes, right. Do you remember that night? We stopped in and visited your friends." "Yes, I remember. I remember they were very kind hosts. They were so careful for us and also let us stay the night." "Yes," Juyu replied. "But you didn't notice it, did you? You wouldn't notice it, I suppose." "Notice what?" "Who sat at the table?" "We all did." "Who sat at the table? Tell me. Who is we?" "Well, The Zhang family, of course. I don't remember the others' names. I don't understand your point. Did you see any women at the table? You were there, weren't you? Yes, and who else? What other woman? Oh, there was not enough room at the table for everyone. Right, exactly. So who should sit at the table? All the men? They acted like women are servants. What do you mean? You are a woman, and you sat at the table. It is not the same. I was a guest, but all the other women sat at another table. Only the men sat with us. Oh, that is just their custom. It doesn't mean anything. It is too low. I don't want that style. We are Shanghainese, not this kind of low people. What true Shanghainese wants to give up Shanghai hukou? You're not giving up Shanghai hukou. When we retire, we will go back to Shanghai. I have seen many people return to their home region. I don't believe it. I'm not Jashu. I'm not belongings like these people. They are so eager to give up their home. I am not. I will fight for it. I belong to Shanghai, and Shanghai belongs to me, and no one is going to take it away from our family. So you just want to go back to that job of yours. You prefer to work in a supply depot. Don't say I like the supply depot. Don't mix up the issue. I tell you, I'm not going to give up Shanghai hukou. Okay, but I don't understand. If when I retire we can probably return to Shanghai, and if we don't, the military will make sure to take care of us, what is wrong? The dispute had no conclusion. It just tapered off to silence. Qianlong wondered how he had gotten into this situation. Before he married Juyu, he had seriously considered another woman, but had decided against her because she was the daughter of his superior. He anticipated that she would not respect him so much and chose Juyu instead, who was from the countryside. He thought she would be more compliant and follow his lead, but it was turning out not to be the case at all. His wife seemed more formidable than the military daughter might have been. At least she would have understood the value of military life, and they could have their family together. Yinlin poked her head out of the blanket, observing her breath in the morning light. She sat up and reached for the clothes her grandmother left on the bed and pulled them under the blanket. Yinlin wished they would stay with her father. She liked the soldiers and she adored her dad. At the army base she had lots of friends, but at home she was alone with her mother, and now more recently her grandmother, and her mother did not seem happy. Memories returned to Yinlin of the previous night. Juyu had made a delicious meal of fish with spicy sauce, which everyone ate eagerly. Following the dinner there was a pleasant lull as the dishes were cleared, and each one found something quiet to do in each other's presence. Presently Qianlong pulled out a new Chairman Mao pin he had received. Juyu was the first to notice. "Oh, look! Baba has a new Chairman Mao pin." Wu Wen and Yinlin both stopped and looked. Come, let's see what Baba has." Juyu motioned to Yinlin that she should come gather round. Even Wu Wen got up from where she was, and stood with one hand on the table supporting her. She leaned forward in a reverential posture. It was a Chinese version of Norman Rockwell. Each person in this domestic image looked with adoration at the pin, while communicating pride in Qianlong as he revealed a 5-pointed badge with the image of a soldier holding a rifle in the foreground. "It has red!" Yinlin burst out. She always loved to see color. "And blue," she added, as they noticed the background color behind the words. "Wow," Juyu said. "Was this given to all the soldiers?" No, Qianlong said. "This was given to 3 soldiers in our troop. The other 2 soldiers were more senior than me. I was the only one in my rank." Maybe they gave it to you because you're always writing letters for your comrades, Juyu suggested. Yes, maybe, even for the leaders, Qianlong replied. I'm sure they see his selfless style, too, said Wu Wen. It can't just be about writing letters. Yes, maybe, said Juyu. I can't see the images, Wu Wen said. What's behind the soldier? Yinlin spoke up, saying, I know. She stood on her tiptoes, reaching up to touch the pin. Her father gently grabbed his daughter's hand, preventing her from placing her fingers on the pin. Those are airplanes, she said, with her finger hovering. Yes, good. And that's a hill. It's a ship, Qianlong corrected her. So this represents the 3 divisions of the military, Army, Navy, and Air Force. I thought they stopped making pins. Don't they need the metal? Juyu said. Yes, they have stopped making the pins, unless there is special authorization, replied Qianlong. This statement only added to the prestige of the pin. It was called the 5 Good Soldier Pin, and indicated that Qianlong was a model soldier who worked hard and set a good political example for others. It demonstrated that Yinlin's father was a high-quality soldier in the army. Thus, while being a humble man, Qianlong was identified as a model of greatness, one who should be followed. The family continued to expostulate over the design and beauty of the pin, as Qianlong placed it alongside several others in a treasure box specially made to store them. The family eventually broke off as Juyu had to prepare for the nightly meetings called Critical of Others and Self-Critical. These were nightly meetings for confession which normally required the attendance of every able-bodied person. Juyu went to her room and the others returned to their evening rituals. They did not attend the confessions because Qianlong was in the military and Wu Wen was too old. Yinlin often came with her mother in the past, but now that her grandmother was here, she could stay at home. I get to stay with you, Nai, Yinlin said. Yes, no need to go to those ridiculous meetings. Yes, ridiculous, Yinlin thought to herself. That is what those meetings are. They made her so tired and bored. Her mother never had to attend the meetings on the base, but at home it happened every night. Juyu came out of the bedroom. Her clothing, like everything else at that time, was provided by the government in standard cuts and colors, usually dull green or blue. However, Juyu's wardrobe was different from most. She wore clothes that were supplied by the army, and she was one of the few women who wore skirts instead of baggy pants. To brighten up her shirt, one could hardly call it a blouse, Juyu sewed her own decorative collar onto the top, giving it an air of femininity that was absent on most women's clothes. Juyu threw on her coat and hurried out the door without a parting word. The gathering point was not far. When Juyu arrived, others had already organized their materials and were arranging themselves in marching order. As usual, there was some joking and a sense of casual inattentiveness as they raised their flags. Juyu noticed that her comrades were brief in their greetings, and she sensed a subtle coolness in their attitudes. She attributed this to the fact that she was arriving late and put no more thought into it. Together they fell into unison and began their march singing, "The East is Red." This was followed with, "China has brought forth a Mao Zedong." They continued their marching while singing various songs and chanting slogans. "Chairman Mao, long, long live." "Protect Chairman Mao with our lives." Or, "Beat down the four." Again and again, as if for the first time, they repeated with zeal and eagerness these well-worn, revolutionary phrases. After completing the march, it was time to sit for confessions while warming themselves with a cup of tea. They remained outdoors, gathering just in front of the poster board where the news and important notices were displayed. Remaining outside, despite the evening cold, demonstrated their commitment to endure hardship as they submitted to the discipline of self-examination and confession. During confession, each person took a turn to explain in detail the ways in which he failed the revolution, and then followed this with an expression of renewed commitment to do better. Many of the confessions were of the type that indicated a general laziness, or not being carefully attentive to the words of Chairman Mao, or putting family ahead of the people. These were common confessions. They were the sorts of things that Juyu would recite without thinking. Sometimes confessions were accompanied with a heroic story of inspiration, and sometimes they took a more serious tone. It occasionally happened, though more and more rarely, that during confession an individual sincerely asked a question such as, "Is the revolution really helping people?" But such a person was either too brave, too honest, or too naive, because the next day he would be put in jail, and no one would hear from that person again. These stories were heard of, but such things never happened in Juyu's circle, as each person there was either too careful or too devoted. One by one, each person fulfilled his duty, confessing, attentively listening, and sipping on tea. One of the early confessions was by Comrade Chin Guo, who said he had a wooden Buddha that had been in his family for 3 generations. He had felt the Buddha was too small to be used for firewood, but one day when he looked at the Buddha, he heard the words, "Eating is more important than having," and he realized that while he gets enough food from the government, there are still many people who suffer. He realized that he should stop being selfish and contribute that worthless thing to support the revolution. So he finally swept the demon out of his home and placed it in the community's wood collection for burning. "I do this," he said, "because I want to declare clearly that I have cut with my old ideas, my old habits, and my old family. I am a newborn person, and I understand the superiority of practical living." "Long live Chairman Mao," the group recited at the conclusion of Comrade Feng's confession. As each one took a turn proceeding around a circle, Juyu saw that she would be the final one to speak today. About halfway through, one woman, Comrade Chi Chuntao, recounted to the group an example of Mao Zedong's expectation that women shoulder half the sky. "I want to speak of the Iron Girls," she began. "They have devoted their lives and their bodies to Chairman Mao and to the people," she said. "When I read it on the news board here—" She paused to indicate to everyone where they could read the article for themselves. "I felt it was glorious. Their example makes me want to do better with my life. These women are helping to dig a canal from the Zhejiang River." Juyu kept a straight face as she listened. She was well advanced in the final term of her second pregnancy, and while not feeling very comfortable, simply looked ahead blankly, not bothering to glance at the board. She had also heard about these Iron Girls, and it disgusted her. These women were devoted volunteers, yes. They worked in the river digging the mud, but this was northern China, and they continued their work all year, even through the winter where the temperature dropped to -20 degrees. She could not imagine these women with half their bodies soaked in water all day in the summer and at such temperatures in the winter. For Juyu this was ridiculous. She did not believe in it at all, but she did not say anything. Comrade Chi continued. Again she gestured to the message board. "These young women love their country so much," she exclaimed. Even taking a few paces toward the board, looking at the poster with adoration, moisture glistening in her eyes, she choked up, turning to the group and with difficulty continued her reverence. "They are young, but they want the people to progress." She laid special emphasis on the word people. "They don't want to be laggard. They have a vision of a day in the future when the water from the Zhejiang River will increase the value of the farmland and ease the life of the villagers." There was silence. Finally, after quietly wiping her tears, the woman continued in a whisper. "So, when I complain in my heart about work and the heavy lifting, I just think of those heroes. These women shouldering half the sky." Again she paused, blinking back the tears. "I am filled with enthusiasm to do my job with all my heart. I will not waste any time with talking or slowness. I will not let my laziness damage the people." At this it was clear that Comrade Chi was finished, and the group replied in unison, "Long live Chairman Mao." However, Juyu had already stopped listening. After the second time that Comrade Chi pointed to the board, Juyu felt she should at least pretend to show interest in the article posted there. She scanned the board to see the article, but as she did so, she saw another poster beside it. The heading of that poster read, "Witness the despicable soul of Juyu." Juyu froze. Was there someone else named Juyu? She didn't think so. The poster had to be speaking about her. As the comrade's duty to confess continued around the circle, Juyu looked more carefully at the words on the board, trying to absorb the accusations that were posted there. Clear for everyone to see. Beat down Juyu. Juyu is Tai Tai. That means an officer's wife. She thinks she can be different from other people. At first she read it as if she were reading any other news story, but as she absorbed the intention behind the words, her skin prickled. Comrade Tsuyu spoke. It was obvious that he was in distress because he had been secretly wiping tears from his eyes for some time. When his turn came, he said he had been selected as part of the requirement that people guilty of worthless thinking needed to be identified. There was a quota that each organization had to fulfill, perhaps 5% of the working population. No one knew for sure, but every company had someone who was identified as having tendencies that people in the West might simply label as imaginative or thoughtful. Such people were labeled as unproductive or selfish. "Recently I have been selected for work camp," Tsuyu began. A few people in the group made quiet sounds of sympathy. "It is because I am too selfish and need to be taught the value of work. But I confess that I have had angry thoughts. I felt that I am devoted to Chairman Mao." He paused, his voice coming out in a whisper. "But I like to read and write a little at night, before I sleep. The problem is I come to work tired sometimes and not very eager to do the work. But I know I will do better. At the work camp there will be no time to read or to write. I will miss my home here, in these friendly streets, but I am willing to sacrifice for the people." These final words he pinched his eyes together and looked down, no longer able to look at those around him. Again the group replied, "Long live Chairman Mao." Juyu hardly heard the previous confession as her turn to speak came closer. She realized that today was not going to be a day where she made her usual confessions. Today was a day for her humiliation. In China, the people is always right. The people is what the Communist Party works for. Chairman Mao is head of the Communist Party, and he's like God. But he works for the people. That means Juyu, who thought she was different as others, was being accused of a great sin by elevating herself above the people. Juyu didn't know what she should say. Her turn was next. Tears came to her eyes, but she refused them. Something in her got black and angry. She turned and looked again at the poster. "She thinks she is the opposite of the people," it read. "So she isolates herself from the people. She will not do the same duty as other people. Let's beat her down together." Yes, she was going to get beat down. Today she was going to receive the beating, and the beating was expected to come from her own mouth. As she thought about what to say, Juyu felt searing indignation. What is their complaint? Why are they isolating me? She thought. She looked at them in their drab blue and gray hideous outfits. She knew that she stood out, she understood that. But what's wrong with trying to make yourself better, even as the country's getting better? Why can't a person seek more dignity? Juyu was not a person with clear thoughts, but she had a clear attitude. She knew she was better than this. She was better than drab gray. She was better than these baggy pants, and she was not going to destroy her body working waist deep in muddy water. Following Chairman Mao and devoting your heart to the people is good. She devoted herself. Hadn't she devoted her entire life to her parents? And now isn't she sacrificing herself to raise her daughter and care for her husband? So who wrote this poster? Such a poster would never go up without agreement from the others. Why did they want to hurt her? She tried to recall. Was there anything that had happened recently? She looked across to Chang Mengyao. She recalled how not long ago his hand seemed to brush against hers as he stopped to talk with her recently. Was he angry that she retracted her hand so visibly? What a man, she thought. Touching a pregnant woman with suggestion in his eyes, it disgusted her. Juyu adjusted her body again, uncomfortably, and then recalled something that happened at work earlier in the week. A truck had arrived at their distribution center full with eggs from the country. Unloading this truck was a job for everyone. Even the highest leader came out to transfer the eggs from the truck to the storehouse. Juyu as an accountant was no exception, but Juyu in the conditions imposed by her pregnancy was slow and found it difficult to lift, and she was in no mood to fight for progress. She struggled with each box, finding herself forced to prop the heavy weight on top of her stomach. She walked slower than the others, most of whom also struggled with the boxes. She recalled Comrade Chi's showy enthusiasm. Comrade Chi continually pressed her colleagues with smiles and encouragements to seek the good of the people, or to gain more glory for the country, and today was no exception. She seemed almost to run with the egg boxes, pushing her body to the limit, all the while talking about how good the farmers are to produce so many eggs for the people. Perhaps the beat-down poster came from her hand. It was hard to know, Juyu thought. If I work slowly, how could they be angry at me for this? My child might be deformed because of these boxes. Juyu became aware of an attentive silence. It was her turn to speak, and the people waited patiently for a word. She looked around at her comrades. She began. But she couldn't find words to speak. She was angry to be judged by these people. As she opened her mouth again to speak, her mind flashed back across the years of her life. She worked so hard, and yet, what did the people do? They wanted to take away what little remained of her dignity. Her sweet memories of childhood had all but disappeared. Her school years had been given over to sleeping by a roadside, collecting chicken shit, and enduring the scorn and abuse of her classmates. When she came home, she had to parent her parents. And now when her life is turning for something better, her own colleagues want to make it ugly. They want her to abuse her body. They prefer that she damage her own child. And since she refused this, they want to beat her down. Tears slipped down her face and dripped from her chin as her mouth hung in an open grimace. They wanted to call her Tai Tai. She looked around at each one of them, hating them. She did nothing to them. She only tried to improve her life, and the people would not allow it. Yes, there were tears, but they were not tears of repentance. They were tears of rage. Her face suffered pain, but it was not the pain of penitence. It was the anger of a child denied the love that was her natural-born right, betrayed one time too many. Juyu's colleagues had hoped for a confession, but had accepted tears as a replacement. It was night now, and people were ready to retire. As the darkness and cold closed in around them, Juyu's tear stains glistened on her face like stars in the black night. Her colleagues uttered "Long live Chairman Mao" one last time. The group dismissed, and Juyu disappeared into the night. Yinlin took one last stretch and began changing into her day clothes while still under the blanket. It wasn't easy, but at least she avoided some of the shock of the cold room. She jumped out of bed, ran to the opposite corner of the room where the chamber pot was kept behind a light blue curtain decorated with birds and fish. Coming from there, she went straight to her father's boots. Oftentimes, because her father would go out before breakfast, Yinlin would find a delicious warmth left by his body heat for her morning feet. "Look at your daughter," her mother said as she dished up the food, suppressing a smile. The moment of joy and affection was the first sign of reprieve from a long night of tears and discussion between Juyu and her husband. In those days, Qianlong was the hero of the family. He was a soldier, and his wife Juyu loved a strong man, a soldier who would take care of them all. As he sat drinking tea at the table, Yinlin snuck glimpses of him and his ruddy cheeks. His eyes smiled back at her. Her mother dropped a bowl of congee on the table. "Yinlin, come eat." One dark afternoon, an army truck pulled up to the front of the house, and Qianlong got out of the passenger side, going to the back. Another younger soldier followed him out, and a second one got out from behind the driver's seat. Both the younger soldiers quickly ran behind the truck and undid the cloth cover, releasing the flap to reveal a metal drum-shaped oven, which the two soldiers lowered down and carried with grunts and directives such as, "Here, here, here," or "Careful." Meanwhile, Juyu stood at the door with her eyes wide, asking, "What's going on? What are you doing?" Yinlin clung to her mother as the two men paused at the opened front door, nodding their greetings to Yinlin and her mother. Winter entered their home as Yinlin's father and another soldier placed a large wooden pad on the floor. Then the other two men carried the oven through the door and set it down in the corner immediately to their left. "Good, good," Qianlong said, patting one man on the back. Qianlong seemed unusually friendly to the men, perhaps because they were under the shelter of his home or because they had done him a special favor. They saluted at the door and were soon back on the road, grinding the truck into gear, heading forward and out of sight. The metal drum was cold, and it took many hours for Yinlin's father to mount it securely to the floor and set up a system of exhaust. The room was especially cold as he had to vent the stove outside, and this meant allowing cold air to come in. It had long been dark by the time the work was finished, and Qianlong gathered some bits of old paper and slivers of wood he had already gathered for this purpose, and soon had a small fire going. Yinlin and her mother both watched. The smell of wood and paper burning in the house was unusual. The fire was small, having little effect on the temperature of the stove, but the sharp edge of cold had visibly disappeared from the metal. Qianlong stepped out of the house for a moment as Yinlin snuck a peek into the door of the stove. "Stay away from there," Juyu said. But she too was intrigued. None of her neighbors had such a thing in their home. It would bring a permanent change to the conditions they lived under in the cold Shanghai winters. Qianlong returned to the house with a large metal pail full of black coal shards. He hunched down and quickly tossed a number of coals into the stove, then blew air into the door for several minutes. Satisfied, he closed the door of the stove, then adjusted a few vents, opening holes near the surface. Finally he sat, and as Yinlin reached out to touch the stove, quickly but gently, Qianlong grabbed hold of her arm and said, "No, daughter. That metal is going to get quite hot, you see." He drew her closer. "Even from here you can already feel the warmth, right? But if you touch that metal, you will get burned. It will be very painful. You must promise me not to touch this stove when there is a fire inside." Juyu brought Qianlong a cup of tea, then rounded up some food for dinner. Qianlong rested from his work, satisfied that he had brought warm goodness into the home for everyone. Yinlin stood in front of the stove. "My father is so wonderful," she thought. She held her hands toward the heat and stared at her father, who stared out the window. The stove became a new centerpiece in the home. It was used for cooking as well as heating the main room and even the bedrooms. During the winter, the coals of the stove were always kept alive until morning, when they were reignited for breakfast and water for washing. By the warmth of this stove, many family conversations and events took place, and Wu Wen, affectionately called Nai Nai after Yinlin was born, could sit comfortably. It was by this stove that Yinlin would often sit and play and talk with her grandmother, especially when Juyu was out doing her marches. Juyu often told Yinlin that she was a child and should not ask so many questions, but Yinlin was an intelligent girl who was quickly learning about her world. "What happened to your feet, Nai Nai?" Why Nai Nai was slow to speak is unclear. Perhaps it was age. but more likely it was resistance, silent, dignified resistance. This was a time in the history of her people that her countrymen were campaigning to rid themselves of the four olds, old ideas, culture, habits, and customs. This social movement occurred after the great damage that the Red Guard, called the Hongwei Bing, had already inflicted upon their society. In the name of protecting Mao Zedong, the Red Guard took away anything that insulted the great leader, or perhaps say, threatened his power. Capitalism was considered an enemy. Many capitalist bosses were put to public shame for their crimes, sent away to work as laborers, imprisoned or killed. Once elegant and costly homes such as hers were converted into Communist Party offices or barns for raising chickens and pigs. The old history, the old life that her countrymen tried to destroy, was the only life she knew. Now she sat in a dark room beside a warm stove. It was hardly surprising that she had little to share with a world that had already closed in all around her. But Yinlin's questioning spirit, her childlike innocence, brought Nai a sense of hope. Nai, why are your feet different from other people? Were you born like that? In my family, she said quietly, girls were more admired if they had small feet. Nai sat like the matron she was. Her face was light-skinned and smooth. Her eyes looked sad. Really? Why? Nai raised her feet a little, displaying her navy blue silk-covered feet. Don't you think these are beautiful? Yinlin did admire the silk booties her grandmother wore, but she had seen her grandmother's feet. They looked like claws. Her actual feet did not look beautiful, but when they were covered in silk, yes, she thought they were beautiful. Yinlin nodded and smiled up at Nai. Yinlin wondered how she could get her feet to be like her grandmother's, so she asked, if I wear shoes like that, do you think I can have small feet too? Her grandmother looked down and shook her head slightly, no. How can I get feet like yours, Nai? This is not allowed anymore, granddaughter. Tell me, Nai, tell me. When I was young, I was made to soak my feet in a special mixture of spices and animal blood. Yes, is that all? After soaking my feet, then one of my father's workers came and pressed my toes under my foot until you could hear them crack. Crack? What do you mean? Yinlin hesitated. Is it painful? Yes, Yinlin, it was painful. Sometimes it was so painful. How come? If it is painful, why did you do it? You do it to show your devotion. If you want to be a good wife, you do this procedure. The women or girls who are afraid of this pain don't make good wives. Does that mean Mum is not a good wife? Yinlin asked. As I said, Yinlin, it is not allowed to make these beautiful feet anymore. We live in a different world now. Yinlin was quiet for a little while. Hot air could be heard moving in the stove. Yinlin looked at her grandmother. She was wearing a navy blue outfit designed according to the old manner. It had no buttons, and it wrapped around the body. Underneath was a more intimate layer of white, but that white undercloth extended out of the wrap as a high collar around the neck. This traditional fashion is seen in paintings of times past. It stood in elegant contrast to the long-sleeve button-up shirts that both women and men now wear. Nai was a living embodiment of old China, hidden away in the house of her daughter. "Is that why your clothes are different also?" "Yes." "I want to have that kind of dress," Yinlin said. "Do you like Nai's dress?" "Yes," Yinlin said. She really did admire it. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" Nai began to lose track of her age as she opened up to her granddaughter. "I don't know where you can find such clothes anymore. Even the cloth cannot be found." "Why?" Yinlin was disappointed. She wanted to have this kind of shiny blue cloth also. "Now is not the time for such clothes, Yinlin. Even your mother, who works so hard to find good cloth from the recycling store, can only collect small pieces in a basket. But if you like, I can show you something else." Yinlin's ears perked up. What would her Nai show her? "It is very beautiful, but you have to go to my bed and get it. It is in the drawer, just near my pillow." Yinlin went to the room where she and her Nai slept. The middle room was like an antechamber. You had to pass through this room to get to Qianlong and Juyu's bedroom. Walking through the room, there was a wall of shelves and drawers, the basket of cloth Nai mentioned, and various oddments behind you as you passed through the door. Nai's bed was straight ahead in the back corner. It was made of hongmu, a rare species of rosewood. It was done in the old style, enclosed all around, with an opening on the side facing the door to the eating area and the stove. It was like the opening of a stage, and had a curtain, or, in the summers, a mosquito net that could be drawn shut. Often the curtain was pulled back, and you could see the old but still elegant silks covering the mat and pillows. The entire surface of the bed frame was carved, both inside the enclosure and out, on panels as well as drawers and pillars. Where there was a wooden surface, there was carving. On the outside, at the foot of the bed, was a scene of two ducks playing with a lotus. This was intended as a wish for a fulfilling and long-lasting marriage. Other scenes all around the outside of the bed represented episodes from the classic novel Dream of the Red Chamber. On the inside of the bed, including all along the surface of the canopy of the bed, were carvings of 100 children. Some scenes had children playing and having fun, sometimes reading, other children being taught by a tutor. Such a bed was thought to be blessed. 100 children carved in the bed meant you will have lots of offspring. Yinlin often wondered why her grandmother's bed was so different from usual people. All the other beds that Yinlin ever saw were the same light brown color of her parents' bed, and usually had no head or footboard. Compared to her grandmother's wooden, heavy as concrete bed, the others were quite unsubstantial. Yinlin passed many mornings or afternoons playing inside the enclosure of her grandmother's bed, looking at the little carvings of children and making up stories for each of them. She animated the characters with voices and reached to touch the human figures and plants. She also traced the Chinese language characters with her fingers, or looked inside the various drawers and pockets hidden away in different places. Some drawers were secret, carved so delicately that it was not easy to see the way to pull it open. Yinlin went to the drawer that Nai directed her to. It was below the pillow and was the first of 12 drawers, each with an image from the Chinese zodiac. This drawer at the front of the row had an image of a rat, and the rat was holding a sack representing the wealth it had gathered. The sack was the knob that Yinlin pulled to open the drawer. As Yinlin pulled on the drawer, she found old buttons and string, a small bottle of perfume that had mostly dried, and a small silk pouch. It was black and had a drawstring. Yinlin pulled out the purse and felt it. It was soft, and there was something heavy inside. Outside the room, Nai asked in a barely audible voice, "Did you see the small purse inside?" Yinlin replied that she had. "Bring it to me. Let's have a look." Yinlin closed the drawer and brought the purse to her grandmother. Nai placed the purse on her lap and opened the top. She slid the contents into the palm of her hand. Something long came out, but it was wrapped in cotton as if sleeping in a bed. "Unwrap it," Nai said to Yinlin, "carefully." Yinlin delicately pulled the top surface of cotton away to reveal a dark green jade object. Yinlin leaned against Nai's leg. Nai said, "You see. Hold it out in the light where we can both admire it." Nai lifted herself slightly in her chair and looked to the object in Yinlin's hands. She said, "Yes." There was a pause, and then she rested back in the chair. Silently, Yinlin's grandmother found a cloth from somewhere and wiped her eyes. Nai often wiped her eyes, and claimed that the cold made them runny. "Put it here." Nai pointed to her lap. "Do you know what this is?" Yinlin shook her head. As Yinlin gently touched the object before her, Nai explained. "This carved jade was the centerpiece of my wedding headdress. These birds are cranes, and to the Chinese it represents long-lasting love and loyalty in marriage." "Hold it, Yinlin. What do you think?" Nai asked. "Do you think it is heavy or light?" Yinlin held it a little, observing it carefully. The object was longer than her small hands, but thinly carved. Even so, it was heavy. Yinlin marveled at it. Like the carvings on the bed, the image told a story. She ran her fingers along the cranes, who were made to look as if they were building a nest. The jade was in an oval shape and would have rested on the forehead of the bride. Something in this object spoke to Yinlin not just of riches, but deep wealth. Wealth that was more than money. This piece of green jade looked to her not only like a messenger of the past, but a messenger from the heart of the earth. Of course, she was too young to articulate the feeling in such words, but it is often the case that children know more than they can tell. Then, after a few moments, Nai spoke again. "It is such a pity that people took the headdress away. It was one of a kind, nothing else like it, each stone carved by hand, and it was designed with such care, using very rare materials. Do you understand? This is the value of the hairpiece. But the people who took it away could see no value in it at all. Everything of beauty they tried to destroy." From this talking, Yinlin understood that her grandmother did not agree with the Hongwei Bing. She did not agree with the colors of the clothing people wore. Her bed was different, expensive. Actually, it was a shame to have such an expensive bed, so different from everyone else. But her Nai seemed as unwilling to move as that heavy bed with all its stories and magic of the past. Nai told her to return the jade to the drawer so that it would not be lost. I've been thinking about that photo of Bobby in the tub, his flesh all doughy and soft, gripping the sides of the mixing bowl and staring into the future. I guess when you look at the photo, anyone would feel some affinity with him. You might recall your own grandparents and parents. You too arrived on this planet in wide-eyed innocence. You too have at times sensed the hope presented by something like a space race or social advancement. You too have lost caring hands, or have seen the past turn yellow like stiff photos. You and I both know the time captured in this image is not a Grecian urn. Bobby himself will not, cannot remain as he was. He will advance as we all do. He will leave infancy and become a grown boy, and the boy will become a man. But what does it mean to become a man? Years later, the night staff who finished their jobs early waited out the last 20 minutes of their shift at the loading dock behind the kitchen of a care home where Bobby worked. They sat or stood, staring toward the horizon where the setting sun had already fallen behind the houses, leaving its bright orange glow. They all wore regulation white pants and white shirts, and all of them removed their hairnets, leaving each one with a hat-head appearance. "So, where's everyone going tonight?" Tristan asked Glenn. Tristan was a stoner. He talked like a hoser with the attitude of a Cheech or Chong. His long blonde hair hung down straight at the back and swooped to one side at the front, often hanging over his eyes. He puffed on a cigarette, his wispy-haired upper lip always stretched into a Cheshire cat grin. "I don't know, man. I don't do anything on Saturday nights." Glenn was straight like a line. His voice was mechanical and friendly. He sounded like a computer repairman. He was a cheerful sort, careful about detail and efficient at work. He liked to laugh. "Really? What do you do then? Go home and jerk off?" Glenn smiled generously at this crudity and said, "I live at home with my mother. We don't have that much excitement. I might just watch a show and go to bed." "Really? Isn't that a bit boring?" "Maybe, but after work I just want to relax, you know." Tony, who hadn't spoken yet, piped up, "You're not really a man. How can you go home to your mother on a weekend?" He was standing back near the door opposite Bobby, who also stood while Glenn and Tristan were sitting. Glenn turned and looked up at Tony. "Shut the fuck up," he replied, demonstrating his manliness to Tony, who, startled, grew flush in his face and shifted his feet. "Do you think I should go out and get drunk? Should I watch a football game with the guys?" "Yeah, man, shut the fuck up," Tristan repeated smoothly to Tony, still grinning. Then turning to Glenn, he asked, "Why not go out and get drunk with the boys? I would." He spoke in a manner that was halfway between talking and laughing. It was his hoser way of making it seem that everyone was in on the same joke. Bobby, watching it all, had already lost the flow of the conversation. Bobby often had difficulty keeping up with social chatter, because things would be said that would catch him like a hook through his flesh, pulling him up and away from everyone else. This time the hook was the comment about being a man. Bobby was struck by Tony's challenge that Glenn was not a man. But how? The man, Glenn, sitting in front of Bobby, talking about going home to chill out and watch a show with his mother, was obviously male. How can another person say that he is not a man? This was the first time that Bobby was confronted with the idea that other people might have a concept of being a man that floated separately from simply being born with a male body. What, he wondered, could possibly be the definition of a man? It never dawned on him that other men were busily trying to conform to an idea of manhood. Why would anyone want to conform to an idea when they already possess the real thing? We four, Bobby thought, chilling out after a day of work in the kitchen, were all obviously men. If this were not the case, then what? What is a man, supposedly? Bobby got depressed as he began to think about all the men he knew and considered. Is it possible that a man is someone who can drink a lot? Does a man have to be rude and aggressive? Is a man, God forbid, the kind of character we see in Harlan? Harlan had recently come into the kitchen looking like he hadn't showered. His long, thick black hair looked greasy, and he had at least 3 days of thick stubble on his face. He was strong like a bulldog and a bit puffy with pasty skin, like overripe dough. He strolled into the kitchen waving something around in people's faces, discussing how upset his stomach was from drinking the night before. He took glee in provoking people's disgust. Because of recent cases of E. coli at the care home, all kitchen workers were to submit stool samples. Harlan waved the greenish slop in his test tube at his female colleagues, and they looked away in disgust. Most appeared unable to utter their thoughts, but one person, a small but bellicose woman who had a big husband, spoke to Harlan without fear, confronting him. "Put your shit away, Harlan. People don't want to see that crap. God, you're such an imbecile." Harlan did put his shit away, smiling and looking around. He had accomplished his purpose. Most of the other men at work regarded Harlan as a hero. Harlan's flat-footed, beer-infested behavior repulsed Bobby, and it amazed him that the other guys followed Harlan around like little puppies wagging their tails and rolling over whenever he came around. Why? Is that what a man is? Is that so admirable? In Bobby's mind, Glenn was much more of a man than either Tristan, Tony, or especially Harlan would ever be. In fact, Bobby had a growing admiration for how clearly Glenn could speak in Harlan's language, "Shut the fuck up," while at the same time speaking in a caring manner about going home to his mother, with no seeming concern about how mundane it appeared to the rest of the guys. Bobby encountered this kind of thinking several years later in North Carolina also. One chilly day as he came to work in a fluffy blue and green coat that his sister bought him for Christmas, 2 male teachers were standing in the hallway. One was the Marlboro man, and the other was some kind of race car driver. They were chatting with one another in that quiet and casual manner of conspirators when Bobby walked in. As Bobby passed them by and walked down the hall, Marlboro Man commented loud enough for Bobby to hear, and in a marbled voice that sounded like he had a plug of tobacco in his lip. "I don't know how he can come to work dressed like that." Bobby heard the comment and was again confronted with the fact that some guys have an idea of what it means to be a guy. And whatever idea they had must be at the root of why Bobby had no desire to be in their company at all. Bobby felt no affinity, no attraction, no reason to ever share himself with them. To Bobby, these men just lived on the surface and took on characteristics that seemed destined to diminish their true manhood by their appearance of it, an appearance that seemed calculated for approval. And that approval would come not from their own hearts, but from a concept they derived from who knows where? TV? Advertisements? On the other side of the globe at Renmin University of China, in Beijing, Yinlin sat on her bed surrounded by a disordered pile of books, some with papers folded in the pages and others spread open around her. Yinlin's glasses were pushed up on the top of her forehead, and she held the page close to her eyes, her fingers splayed across the cover of a plain book. "Oh my God, what a bastard!" she blurted out, just as her roommate came through the door. Her roommate looked up and replied, "Oh, someone disappoint the little rabbit?" It was Duan Laifen. Laifen was one of those girls who caused men's eyes to go off course. She was tall and slim, with pert little breasts that nosed around like mewling kittens. To emphasize her advantages, she wore blouses that settled lightly over her body, usually white. Today she exposed more of her neck than appropriate. Every movement, a breeze or shifting mood registered in her appearance. Like a curtain blowing from the window, there was something continuously alluring about her presence. Laifen considered herself a modern woman, not trapped by the morality of the past. For her, intercourse with a man, any man, was as necessary as water. Yinlin actually didn't notice Laifen coming into the room. She was reading about Chairman Mao and had just pieced together another bit of his story. It was not easy finding out about the life he led with his many wives, as this was not helpful to the propaganda of the day. She was disgusted with what she was learning, and it stunned her that Chairman Mao was so admired. Laifen dropped her purse on the bed and slid out of her skirt. Standing in her exposed undergarments, she reached into her purse for a cigarette. Lighting it, she stepped across to Yinlin and blew smoke her way. Yinlin turned and realized that she had been spoken to. "Oh, it's not what you think." "Really?" Laifen replied. "Aren't you the one who attracts so many men with your rabbit innocence?" "I don't want a man," Yinlin replied. She was already in a disgusted mood. Yes, it was true, many men were attracted to Yinlin, but she always kept herself a safe emotional distance, and she, unlike Laifen, was not a well for any man to find water. "Of course you want a man, you innocent girl," Laifen replied. "You're not such a pure rabbit, are you?" Laifen drew on her cigarette and took a glance at herself in the mirror, admiring her form almost as much as any man would. Yinlin spoke. "I want a cigarette." "You? I can't believe it." "I want to be like you. I don't want to care about anything." "Really, darling, the rabbit is turning black." Laifen used her own cigarette to light another one for Yinlin, leaving her lipstick mark on the tip. Yinlin inexpertly took a draw on the cigarette, then blew out smoke. "Do you know about Chairman Mao?" Yinlin asked. "Did you know how much he never respected women?" "Chairman Mao? Is that what all these books are for? You need to get out more often, Linny girl. He's disgusting. He changed his wives like he changes clothes." "Yes," replied Laifen. She had her arm resting on the top bunk above Yinlin's bed and was rubbing her cheek along her arm, enjoying the soft feel. "Like, he has the first wife, and when that first wife was put in jail, he married the second wife. And when the second wife started on the way of the Long March, carrying the baby for him, of course, in that difficult condition, she lost the baby. Then she got pregnant again, during the march, and lost the baby again. Can you believe it?" Yinlin asked. Where did you learn this? From all those books? Lai Fen prodded. Yes, and you know what? She got pregnant again and lost the baby again. And this destroyed her. So she always has serious women's stuff issue. So later she had to go to the Soviet Union to cure her problem after New China. Before that, actually. But even at that time, she suffered with him all along. Yinlin put special emphasis on all along. She paused. And also by the long march, she gave up her kids to the local peasants because they are marching and can't keep the kids because the kids always cry and that risks being discovered by the enemy. And all that time, what kind of animal is going to have sex with her all along the long march and in the mud so that she keeps getting pregnant? Lai Fen didn't reply. She just turned, and with her cigarette in her mouth, she looked at her profile in the mirror above the desktop. Yinlin continued. Why does everyone speak so highly about Chairman Mao when the women are treated this way? And you know, when her body is in such terrible condition, he starts seeing Jiang Qing. So he sends his wife to the Soviet Union so the doctors can fix her body, but actually he uses this opportunity to be with his new lover. His wife is getting surgery to fix her body, and the great chairman is playing around with a beautiful film star. I don't want the man to use my body like that. I don't want to be just a cloth to be thrown away. I hate it. I hate him. He's such a bastard. Oh, Puss, you're so afraid of what the man will do to you, replied Lai Fen. It is not so disgusting, you know. You should taste it. Yinlin was surprised at Lai Fen's reply. She even stopped talking for a moment. But look at Jiang Qing. Do you see what happened to her in the end? That doesn't bother you? Listen, no one will pay attention to this kind of talking, and some people will be offended. Don't you know he's God? He's a man. He's smart, like an emperor. He's the kind of a man many women want, a model for a husband. What? I can't believe it. You don't get angry? Why? This is how men are. And Chairman Mao is the biggest big shot. It is not so bad, you know. Do you think his wives got no pleasure being with him? Yinlin grew quiet. She felt the unfair feeling about male and female, but it was worsened by the fact that she could not get agreement from her roommate, and Lai Fen was the most free woman of all her roommates. At that moment, Chow Tungmei came in. She was a practical person and dressed in a more formal manner, choosing to wear a jacket over her blouse and skirt. She was not tall and lean as Lai Fen, but still slim. She was an efficient person with an inviting manner and appearance. She looked around and noticed that Yinlin was smoking. "What's going on?" she asked. "Rabbit here is glumming about how women are treated, and she thinks Chairman Mao is a bastard." "What? Don't say that. What's wrong with you?" "Oh, never mind. I don't want to talk about it." Yinlin had already given up this line of her argument. Then after a thought she continued, "Don't you think women are treated unfairly? We're supposed to be equal. We shoulder half the sky, but do you think it's really that way?" As she asked the question, she thought about her roommates. All of them. All of them. When they were not studying, they were chasing men. The awareness began to dawn on her that she may never get agreement from them about this topic at all, but she tried anyway. "Did you never wonder why there are only men in the engineering department?" "Engineering?" gasped Lai Fen as she butted her cigarette in a dish. "Engineering?" Tung Mei repeated. "What women wants to go into engineering? We're just women. Why would we want to take that burden?" "Just women," Yinlin whispered to herself. She stopped talking. "Never mind," she said. She got her books and started packing them. Yinlin realized that she was not going to get agreement from her roommates, and decided it was time for her to get out of the room. She needed to do something to shake her mood. Over the years, Yinlin found again and again that her views didn't fit those around her. Because of this, Yinlin felt perhaps she was wrong, but it didn't remove the anger. Nor was she able to resolve the contradiction that women shoulder half the sky, yet we are just women. Who are these two characters, Bobby Young and Yinlin Dai? Like words spoken out of a dream, they appeared on this planet. First, there was no Yinlin, no Bobby. Then there was. Miracles of new life, embodying forth. And they are real people, though their names have been altered. The early years of their lives are a process of slowly waking out of a dream, as little by little they gain consciousness of themselves and the world they live in. Yet, looking back on this slow waking of childhood is also like trying to recall words spoken out in the dark, another kind of sleepy dream memory. And of course we embellish it, don't we? We have to. We add details and fit things together in a certain way. Isn't that the way with all storytelling? And so here we are. We could further ask, who are we? For we too appeared on this planet. We too slowly become conscious of ourselves and our world, which we recall in fragments. Like the morning I awoke to recall my son's words, we perhaps wonder if all those childhood days were even real. But then someone comes along and confirms the memory, and you realize it was so. We lived and grew, like the students in my kindergarten class, into visible expressions of consciousness in a material world. Expressing what? What essentially are we? What is inside that wants to come out, manifest itself? Freddie Mercury sings, "Look into my eyes and you'll see." What? What will you see as you look into Bobby's eyes or Yinlin's? What will a person gazing into our eyes see? Descartes, who had a God Almighty influence on the thinking of our modern world, wanted to make it all material and only material long ago. He got us on a false foot. He once described laughter as a procedure in which blood coming from the right-hand cavity of the heart through the central arterial vein causes the lungs to swell up suddenly and repeatedly, forcing the air they contain to rush out through the windpipe, where it forms an inarticulate, explosive sound. As the air is expelled, the lungs are swollen so much that they push against all the muscles of the diaphragm, chest, and throat, thus causing movement in the facial muscles with which these organs are connected. And it is just this facial expression, together with the inarticulate and explosive sound, that we call laughter. This is surely an insufficient description. Descartes wanted to rule out all conscious experience, though this is impossible. Similarly, his explanation is insufficient to describe the revulsion of Harlan's female colleagues, Bobby's delight in soapy bubbles, Yinlin's desire to share gum with her classmates, and everyone's curiosity about, or fear of, death. Love and hate and many other invisibles escaped Descartes' superficial construction. People, committed to such a vision of reality, refuse to sleep, refuse to dream. They become like walking zombies, awake, yet if you look into their eyes, what do you see? Both Canada and China were under Descartes' spell at the time of Yinlin and Bobby's birth, though China was more brutal and single-minded in their application of it. To the thinking of the age, words spoken in the dark were just that, words. Nothing else. Guttural noises, articulated in a speech apparatus. Best to avoid sleep and dreams altogether. Or if you must dream, then dream of a good revolution. Such dreams tended to take a darker tone of menacing justice. Canada and the West were less repressive, but not completely free from similar impulses. Fortunately for the West, there were and still are some dreamers, perhaps China too, but against huge odds. Who are Bobby Young, Yinlin Dai, you and I? Well, we are surely this much. We are conscious beings in a material world. We may seem to appear from nowhere, but we are born into a context that includes ancestors and a history. Being conscious means that there is something about us that is not visible to the world, nor even perhaps to ourselves, but it is made manifest in our material existence. Bobby Young and Yinlin Dai are children. The dream of life has enchanted them and manifests in their actions. Bobby lives in a world of burning barrels, crazy Marys, and his father's tickles. He knows how to call the police. Yinlin lives in a world of balloons, pretty dresses, and bubble gum. Yet wherever she goes there appears a snake that makes her shiver. In both worlds there are locked doors and dark windows. In both worlds they will mature to realize there are expectations about who and what we should appear to be. What does it mean to live in bodies, to experience the worlds of matter and consciousness? What dreams will define the material conditions of our lives? What effect will the material conditions have on the language of our dreams? Who are we, really? Freddie sings, "Look into my eyes and you'll see I'm the only one."